When two students from the Magic Academy challenged each other to a duel, no one expected such an outcome. Gray released a magical ether ball that was 100 times larger than his opponent's. If the professor hadn't intervened, the other student would have been completely destroyed. Looking at Gray, he couldn't understand how he had gained such power. Never before had any student possessed such magical strength. But the truth is Gray is a regressor, and he wasn't always this strong. Here's how his story started. It's the final battle between humanity's greatest heroes and their demonic foe. But this time, we're not following some glorified, overpowered hero. Instead, our protagonist is just another foot soldier doing his job diligently. Being the lowly runt he is, a sharp stray laser blasts straight through his chest, a hit so powerful that he doesn't even resist and just lets it pass through. And that wraps up his story. In his final moments, he glances around at his fellow soldiers, dead and scattered across the battlefield. As for the so-called greatest heroes, well, they're locked in an intense clash against humanity's arch-nemesis, the Liquidator. Among the heroes are 4 brave warriors, each with unique traits and flashy powers. And then there are guys like our boy, foot soldiers, thrown in as sacrificial pawns. These guys are basically like NPCs standing in the corner with no dialogue. Their purpose? Just die. He feels pathetic about himself, thinking how little he has contributed to this war. If only he had been born with some kind of talent. But as powerful as those heroes might be, they don't stand a chance either. The Liquidator slices through them like cucumbers. Literally, a single blow is all it took to wipe them out. Turns out that monster was just toying with his prey the whole time. Humanity's fate has finally been sealed already, or at least that's what Gray Lee thought. This is then he remembers that his heart has already been shredded into bits, and yet he's still not dead. Next thing he knows, he's standing in the middle of the ruins. In front of him is this omnipotent being who gives zero context for what's going on. The mystery dude claims that Gray's body has already healed, but the wild part is that he healed himself using powers buried deep inside him all along. The entity goes on to further say that Gray is actually way stronger than the Liquidator, the same bastard who slaughtered all those heroes like pigs. However, he's not sure if Gray can even handle that power. So for now, the entity lends our boy a portion of his own power, just enough to take down the Liquidator. Back in the real world, Gray's sword is instantly surrounded by mysterious energy, gifted by the all-powerful being. Without wasting time, he puts this energy to the test to see if it's the real deal or just hot air. Turns out this power packs a serious punch, so much so that the Liquidator actually commends Gray for his strength. But it's still not enough. As Gray goes in for another strike, bam! He's sliced in half like the rest. Blood gushes from his bisected body as the Liquidator, weirdly enough, praises him again. He's the first person to push the Liquidator far enough that he had to go all out, but the Liquidator is in for another surprise. Gray isn't done yet. That blackish energy is fueling him. The lower half of his body, which was gone a second ago, has now reformed, made entirely of dark energy. Bro is going full Black Clover mode with that massive sword of his. It's a sight to behold, to think that someone could actually make the Liquidator waver. The enemy sees no other option other than to throw up a honeycomb shield to guard his sorry self. Gray doesn't even look human anymore. He crashes down with his colossal blade, and the impact sends literal shock waves through the air. The shield shatters into glittering pieces, and Mr. Cocky ends up eating shit with the full brunt of the hit. Now the bastard is seriously wondering if the thing he's fighting is even human. Hell, he's not sure if Gray is even alive. Meanwhile, our boy is asking himself the same thing. But right now, all that matters is the fight. And yeah, this freak is tough as nails, but our boy is also determined to do the math and break this bastard down. He's not stopping until this menace is erased. He throws another wild slash, and this creepy fuck starts bleeding this creepy golden blood. In response, the freak busts out some next-level jutsu and sprouts celestial wings. Looks like he's messing with time itself. Day turns into night with the moon glowing like a spotlight from the gods. It's pretty impressive, and Gray admits it, but not impressive enough to shake his confidence. He goes full throttle, launching a preemptive strike straight at the Liquidator's neck, but surprisingly, the sword doesn't pierce. There's some weird shield around him again, then he starts yapping nonsense that flies straight over my head. Apparently, within this plane of true dusk, nothing can hurt him, or at least that's what this bastard claims. He tells Gray to look up at the sky to see just how deep in shit he really is. Well, our boy looks up out of curiosity and sees a blinding star-like thing glowing with insane intensity. Then boom. That thing crashes down like a damn meteor and obliterates Gray from existence. The liquidator stands victorious, staring down at the crater left behind. But thankfully, that mysterious entity from earlier shows up again just in time to rewind everything and send our boy back into the past with an only mission, which is to save the world. By the way, that mystery man's name is Kronos. Apparently, he and the liquidator have some kind of history, but no one is telling us what kind. So anyway, cut back to our boy who opens his eyes in a peaceful green neighborhood right after his regression. It's quiet, calm, and honestly pretty damn photogenic. Turns out he's in his hometown, Renato Village, not just his hometown, but the past version of it. He is almost 15 years in the past. Looks like Kronos kept his word. Gray's been sent back in time for one final shot at saving the world. Suddenly, a stinging pain crawls through his hand. When he takes a look at his hand, he notices wounds and bandages wrapped around his wrist. Now that he thinks about it, this was the time in his life when he was basically a punching bag for Belder and his gang. But with this new shot at life, it'd be pretty pathetic if he still ended up getting bullied. Then again, there's no way he could fight those guys head-on. Bro is way out of their league. In hindsight, even beating the liquidator sounds like a dream. Anyway, he's got to figure out how to deal with these bullies, or he's doomed to relive the same suffering all over again. Seems like bro can't catch a break, or can he? He just so happens to stumble across the same assholes he's been dreading the most. Of course, it's Belder and his goons. Since they've been bored lately, they've been on the hunt for our guy, eager to continue their tradition of good old-fashioned bullying like it's their new religion. They toss a spare sword at his feet, ordering him to pick it up. Our boy stares at the sword, clueless. He still hasn't figured out what these goons are up to. After all, it's been 15 years, so memories are a bit hazy. Belder, meanwhile, assumes Gray is pretending to be clueless on purpose, so he is kind enough to remind him about their usual mock battles. Hearing that, Gray quickly tries to brush these pests off by pointing to his injured hand. He's grateful for the invite, but unfortunately, he can't join because the injury hasn't healed yet. But it looks like bro can't shake these hobos unless he picks up the sword and fights. They even assure him the swords are totally blunt, so there's barely any chance of getting hurt. Gray, however, can't shake the feeling that injury is still possible. No matter how blunt the blade, it's still a lump of iron. One wrong hit in the wrong spot could book your one-way ticket to heaven. Well, he's got a point. One gentle tap on the balls, and you'll be doubled over on the ground in unbearable pain. But these guys don't seem to get the logic behind Gray's words. Belder takes his stance ready to strike. He hates hearing no from Gray, so he charges at him like a raging bull to start the duel. Gray was given time to grab the sword, but it's up, and Beldar is already charging at him. Our boy finds it ridiculous that this dude calls it a mock battle while charging like he's pissed off at his own mother. That's when Gray remembers something a former military doctor told him. The reason his swordsmanship never improved was because of an injury he sustained as a kid. Now that he thinks about it, maybe this is the injury that changed his life forever and forced him to live like a runt. Belder comes crashing down with his blade, but Gray blurs away and dodges the strike. Seriously though, even Gray himself is shocked that he managed to dodge it. Belder's face meanwhile tightens in annoyance at seeing such impressive agility. He throws another strike, which my guy dodges again, then a quick strike aimed at his feet is also easily avoided. The bastard's trying hard to tag our boy. He's like a bloodthirsty man on a mission, determined to take his opponent down. But Gray slips through like a ninja on cocaine. At first, Gray thought Belder was just slow, but then he realizes that it's not the Belder who has gotten slow. It's he himself who has gotten faster. Bro is literally dodging every strike like he owes rent. Even Belder's goons can't ignore what they're seeing. It's like Gray is a completely different person. He might not have the body he once had, but he still has the memories of every battle he's fought. With all that experience mapped in his head, his body is basically on autopilot. He barely even has to try to dodge those strikes. Then Gray grabs the sword to keep this so-called mock battle going, which isn't feeling so mock anymore. Belder is drowning in his own ego, desperately trying to crush Gray under his blunt blade, but my guy had enough. He swings his sword for the first time. The sudden jerk from his powerful swing leaves Belder's hand aching like hell. That just shows how pathetic Belder really is. If Gray is being honest, he actually feels like the loser here, duking it out with such a weakling. But he also believes that Belder doesn't deserve an ounce of pity. He's the piece of shit who bullied Gray, took away his future, and caused all that suffering. So with all due respect, Gray is gonna make Belder taste his own medicine. On the next move, Gray effortlessly knocks the sword right out of Belder's hand, unarming him instantly. While Belder can only feel the humiliation, Gray realizes this dude is worse than he thought. He takes the opportunity to throw a jab, mocking Belder's incompetence with a sword. One single blow sent Belder's sword flying. Then again, being unarmed isn't a big problem. After all, Belder was the one who insisted these blunt blades were totally safe to use in a fight. Gray is going absolutely nuts, swinging the blade so fast it literally cuts through Belder's skin, causing blood to gush out. As the gravity of the situation sinks in, Belder's knees lose all strength and buckle. Wait a minute. Gray thought he was using a blunt blade, so how come this bastard started bleeding? When he looks at his blade to confirm, he finds out it's indeed a blunt one. Though if it had been a sharp sword, this dude might actually be dead. Now, let's not get distracted from the situation at hand. Gray swings the blade precisely, knocking out multiple teeth and leaving Belder's nose bleeding like crazy. My guy is towering right over this bastard, giving him chills for life. It's always pretty amusing to see arrogant pieces of shit getting rendered into sobbing messes. Seems like this much is enough to humble Belder for the rest of his life. Oh well, looks like I spoke too soon. This bastard still hasn't learned his lesson. He orders his goons to get our boy and whip his ass until he's a total mess. The goons hesitate to step forward for obvious reasons. They literally just saw their boss get beaten like a pathetic dog, so it makes no sense to succumb to the same fate even though they have the power to avoid it. One of the guys suggests they attack in unison to overwhelm Gray. The trio quickly leaps into action, surrounding our boy from every direction. Gray, however, is nonchalant as ever. If these guys desperately want their death wish granted, my guy is more than ready. Everyone leaps at him, intending to finish him right here. At first, Gray had an ounce of sympathy for these hobos and had decided to spare them, but it looks like they won't stop until they learn their lesson. So he gives these gutter goblins what they truly deserve. Not long after, their faces are swollen like a baboon's backside after an unforgiving face massage. Once again, Gray finds it ridiculous that these crying emojis in human form used to be his worst nightmare. He recalls this group is currently students of Seria's swordsmanship dojo. Belder admits they are students of that dojo, though they haven't been visiting lately since these soggy biscuits believed they were already powerful enough. Well, that's pretty low standards for someone who's supposed to be strong enough. Not that Gray expects much from the dojo itself. He shows interest in joining the dojo, so he wants these goons to act as his referral. Belder refuses to fulfill the request. After all, he can't imagine the consequences once his master finds out he pathetically got his ass handed to him. Gray knows exactly how to deal with these guys. He merely swings his sword around to intimidate these suckers, hinting at the worst that could happen if they don't listen. Funnily enough, this little threat works wonders. Belder is not only humbled, but that beatdown gave him the speed of a cheetah. He literally speeds down the road to reach the dojo as soon as possible, even leaving his friends behind. A while later, they enter the town. As they walk, Belder expresses his curiosity why Gray is interested in joining a dojo. Turns out this dojo has a recommendation slot for the academy. Our boy doesn't have to say more, since he's sure Belder is mature enough to understand what his main goal is. One of the guys wonders why Gray even feels the need to join an academy when he's already powerful enough. Little do these bitches know, my guy doesn't set the bar that low. He's got his own definition of enough. He vividly remembers the day all of humanity's heroes got slaughtered like pigs in the blink of an eye, and that was supposed to be the world's strongest lineup. Forget the heroes. Even he couldn't scratch that bastard with all the mysterious power he had. Only God knows how much power will be enough to defeat that bastard. Though he wasn't completely hopeless back then, the moment he got those badass dark powers, he felt like an omnipotent being that could destroy anything. The thing that held him back was a lack of swordsmanship skills. He had been relying on a few tricks he learned from the Sword Saint. If only he had spent more time training in swordsmanship just like the Sword Saint did, he's pretty sure he could have turned the tide of the battle single-handedly. This is likely why Kronos sent him here, to grind his ass off until he's worthy to wield that dark, mysterious power again. A while later, we meet the master those goons were talking about. The group is getting an earful for picking a fight with a random civilian. And what's worse, all they got after challenging that civilian was a humiliating defeat. This intimidating woman is swordsmanship dojo instructor Seria. Belder tries to clarify they weren't actually trying to bully anyone. It was just a mere mock battle. The poor bastard ends up taking a devastating blow for his lies, a hit hard enough that he'd be on the moon with this one-way ticket. His goons are shivering in terror, wishing they could just survive this day. Nothing to be afraid of, guys. The stunt she just pulled was a little lesson she wanted to teach these fools. If they call beating up someone unarmed a mock battle, then what she did also counts as a mock battle. She points her sword right over Belder's ugly face and expels him out of the dojo immediately. Not only him, but his goons are joining him too. With that, those pathetic goons take their pathetic loser leader and walk out pathetically. She immediately twirls around, sits on her feet, and apologizes to her new recruit on behalf of her former students who caused him a lot of trouble. My guy brushes off the apology. Back to business. She's heard he wants a recommendation to the academy, to which my guy affirms it. Since Belder and his second-rate team caused him a lot of trouble, she's willing to write a letter of recommendation for him. Though before doing that, she wants him to prove his worth. Both contestants stand against each other, wooden swords in hand. Being the senior, she generously gives him the opportunity to strike first, and thus the exchange of blows begins. They move so fast that literally all they leave behind are trails of silhouettes from their fearsome strikes. All the while, Saria does her job, which is to assess our boy's capabilities. She can tell his swordsmanship is quite practical for his age. It's as if he's been through countless battles before. Now it makes sense why those bozos got their butts handed to them by a single person. His style is mostly self-taught, but every so often, his swordplay looks similar to what's taught at the academy. This likely means someone probably taught him, though his technique is still rough. One thing's for sure though, he's got a lot of raw talent begging to be tapped and harnessed to its fullest. She's basically found a diamond in the rough. Now that she's assessed him, she decides to end the duel with the last blow she's about to deliver. My guy braces himself and effortlessly parries her attack. This macabre dance once again begins. Bro is literally parrying each of her attacks like he's allergic to damage. This prompts the woman to grow anxious. The lack of hesitation on his side is throwing her off. It's like no attack she tries can falter his stance. Hell, she even starts to feel annoyed at herself. To think she has to give her all in a mock battle that was only meant to gauge this young gun's capabilities. She gets overwhelmed to the point she starts feeling fear. For a moment, he looks like some demonic entity about to unleash something massive. After surviving the last swing from our guy effortlessly, she realizes it was just a wild swing. After that crazy swing, Gray starts to feel tired and his energy level drops. The woman sees him sulking and mistakes it for a weakness in his defense. So she lunges like a feisty cat, only to find herself checkmated right on the spot. The tables flipped on her. The broken wooden sword hits the ground while Gray finds himself stumped. For a second there, he found his way back to the same dark power he received in his battle against the Liquidator. The fact that he used a hint of that same power now means that he still has access to his abilities even after regressing into the past. But then it happens. An agonizing drawback engulfs his body in so much pain that he drops to his knees. He can't even hold himself to stand while Saria is alarmed by his condition and wants to help. Even after using a fraction of his power, Gray realizes that his current body is unable to exhibit his abilities. Still, he musters the determination to stand on his feet again despite his body quivering. After telling her that he's okay, Gray finds himself lost in his thoughts, realizing he can hardly stand, which emphasizes just how efficient he's going to have to be with his abilities. Oh, he's also thinking about revealing the information about his power to the experienced swordmaster in front of him. Saria just looks at him dead lost and confused. Meanwhile, our boy assesses the situation with a clear head and concludes that he shouldn't tell anyone about what happened. After all, who would ever believe his ridiculous story? And it's also not like he can control his dark powers at will to demonstrate what he means. Bearing that in mind, he comes up with an innocent excuse that he simply overexerted himself. But to the sword master, she doesn't believe him for a damn second, thinking how ridiculous he's sounding with that excuse. There's just no way for him to have sliced her wooden sword when they were fighting with dull weapons in the first place. She's shown to be clever to the point she understands that Gray is hiding something from her. Virgil's daughter points what's left of her sword towards our boy, causing Gray to inquire if something's the issue. Clearly, the way he is handling his reaction, she understands that he doesn't want to talk about anything for now. Instead of challenging him on it, she respects his decision and asks about his initial interest in getting a recommendation to the academy. Our boy confirms this, sharing that he heard she could help him with that. Saria doesn't deny it either. She emphasizes that with just her authority, she can help him get a recommendation to the Royal Academy of Swordsmanship, the best educational institution their kingdom has to offer. At the same time, surprisingly, she shares no interest in recommending him to attend that institution, adding that Gray is an unfit person for the academy. Her cold words stabbed him sharper than any blade. Gray starts beating himself inside, doubting his abilities, and admitting that he's too weak. His final attack was the only remarkable thing he'd done in that battle. But wait, Saria's not finished talking. She continues her thoughts, arguing that instead of going to the Royal Academy, the kid should instead head to the World Union Academy instead. What a plot twist that is. The revelation hits him harder than Truck Kuin hitting his Isekai victims. Though the Royal Academy is their country's finest, the World Union Academy is the best in the entire world. The institution is deemed the pinnacle of sword mastery. Gray's at a loss for words because this same Magic Academy is responsible for producing the strongest battle squad, including the likes of the Sword Saint Amy. He immediately confronts Saria, questioning if he's even qualified to attend a prestigious institution like that. Funnily enough, the girl destroys his expectations, pointing out that, as he is right now, there's not a shot in hell that he's getting through the door. The Sword Master knows that even Gray is wary of his shortcomings, especially when it comes to his pathetic state of a body right now. When it comes to the Royal Academy, the kid might be able to pull off a miracle because of his sword skills alone, but that's just not the case for the World Union Academy. So, yeah, dude's fucked if he doesn't train his ass off. Even Saria is astonished. The kid has miraculous talent in his swordplay, and yet he's got a stickman of a body. Doubt is starting to creep in, genuinely making Gray worry about the monstrous opponents he'll have to face against in the World Union Academy. It's not exactly a walk in the park, and with his current body, that's out of the question anyway. Seeing his sorrowful state, Saria points out how he's quick to give up even though there are 9 whole months until the Academy's entrance exam. Again, being underconfident in his abilities, Gray thinks that even that time won't be enough for him. Despite her effort in trying to encourage him, even Saria agrees that it's too little of a time, but even then she offers him a chance. The Sword Master wants him to trust her for the 9 months to come because during this time, she's going to make him suffer through hell and back. Yeah. Something tells me she's going to hire David Goggins and make this guy run 3 ultramarathons and do 6,000 pull-ups. Anyway, Gray admits that though he doesn't want to suffer, he doesn't have any other choice. Declaring himself ready, he hopes that the Sword Master will take good care of him. Saria takes a liking to his forward determination. At first, you guys probably think it's a good sign that they're starting off on a positive note, but the atmosphere immediately switches to total fear as Virgil's daughter officially announces the beginning of his hellish training. Gray's agonizing trials began. He trained like Goku and honestly ate like him too. She really is putting him through a bulking phase. He also had to deal with some questionable food, but his teacher was unrelenting and put him through everything. Their sword duels continued the same, the goal of which was to hone his techniques. And then 8 months passed just like that. Congratulations to Gray for earning his shredded body after enduring that long training. Even Saria is out here admiring his physique. Now that they've come to this, she's got nothing in her arsenal left to offer him. He's ready to go out into the real world now. But her easygoing attitude confuses Gray because there's still an entire month left until the entrance exam. Virgil's daughter reminds our boy that he's going to be spending a lot of time traveling to get to the location of the entrance exam. That's why he has to leave early. As a final token of gratitude, Saria hands him a bag of money, ensuring him an easygoing trip, taking care of his expenses for the month. Now that's a real teacher. As for our boy, he still doesn't feel good about the idea of leaving so soon. Her forceful approach saddens him because he thinks his teacher is pushing him away like he's a burden. Smiling at his answer, she thinks he's complicating the situation. Suddenly, Gray brings up the rumor of an ogre's nest nearby, alarming Saria's attention. He also points out that the village is completely unsafe with the lack of security guards. The Sword Master confirms the existence of the nest as well as it was discovered recently. At the same time, she smiles at him, believing that nothing bad will happen. If the worst case happens, they'll just have to rely on the royal capital for help. Though Gray is worried, she thinks his only focus should be to take his exam without any wandering thoughts. In his mind, he's convinced like hell that his teacher is lying to him, soothing him so that he doesn't have to worry. The royal capital is never going to send help to a tiny village. And when the village is raided and destroyed by the ogres, it will inevitably result in Saria's brutal death. In his original life, he learned that she died taking on the battle alone. Anyway, he doesn't tell her any of this and just accepts the situation, thanking his teacher for helping him out all this time. Gray plans to leave right away, earning Saria's smile. She and her two big personalities are rooting for him to pass. A few days later, we get a scene of her traversing a dangerous path to make her way to the nest. Here, skeletal remains of humans are horrifically hung on the trees as a warning. Saria is trying to track down the nest using the information she received from the scout. Spotting the trail of blood ahead, she knows that danger lurks ahead. But before she does anything, the sword master is alarmed by the familiar voice of her disciple. Sitting on top of the tree branch, he questions where his beloved master is headed so late at night. Receiving a surprise entrance from him, she asks what he's doing right here when he's supposed to be focusing on the academy. Sticking his landing on the ground, he taunts her for questioning him when he should be doing it to her instead. She lied to him when she said she was going to ignore the situation of the nest and let the royal capital handle it. Making an excuse, Saria explains that the royal capital refused to come because of their personal matters, which is why she took on the job herself. She's confident in her sword ability, believing that whatever it is in that nest, she can defeat it, especially after receiving the report of the scout. Saria reveals that her opponent is going to be an elite ogre, and henchman monsters range about roughly 50 creatures apart from the boss. She knows fighting off the monsters will be tough because of their numbers, but it's not stopping her from going. By the way, even Gray admits that an elite ogre isn't strong, at least not enough to defeat a woman of her caliber. However, the thing about the ogres is that their unique advantage comes to their brains and overwhelming numbers. With so many of them in that nest, Saria's definitely going to die if they manage to surround and overwhelm her. Apart from that, our boy knows one thing with absolute confidence. Because of his knowledge of his previous life, letting Saria take on the mission alone is like sending her to her death. And in the end, the village will also be destroyed with no protector left. That's the dark future that he's already experienced before. With that in mind, the young disciple requests to team up with her, but his master isn't kind, stating that she's all good on her own. Instead of wasting time trying to convince her that she won't be enough, Gray cleverly tells her that he wants to gain real combat experience. He even goes on to guilt trip her, asking if she's afraid he'll become a burden in her path. Though he's smart, his master points out the ridiculousness of what he just said. Their skill difference is nearly identical right now to the point that she struggles to fight him during their mock battles. Even with that fact in consideration, Saria reminds her disciple that a real battle is much more different, especially when you account for a monstrous nest like this one. This task involves immense danger, which is the reason she doesn't want Gray to risk his life, at least not until he has more combat experience. Her disciple is devastated to hear her conviction. After all, Saria wasn't budging in her stance. So he goes for one last resort, an idea that he wants to share with his master. At first, she's surprised until Gray straight up challenges her to a fight, promising to put her to sleep and then going on by himself to face the ogre. The situation grows tense. The disciple has just challenged his master to a real battle, his sword pointed at her. Gray awaits for her response. Realizing that her student is just as stubborn as she is, Saria admits defeat. She doesn't want him to go on alone, so she reverts to his previous suggestion of going together. All she cares about is that he returns in one piece, and yes, the one piece is real. Both of them band together and venture into the forest to confront the monsters. The night grows older, and finally, the master and the disciple discover the location of the nest. The intelligent monsters use their environment to their advantage. They made a nest that leaves no room for escape in case someone dared to venture all the way here to challenge them. Saria thinks that the creatures must be confident in their ability, while Gray argues that it's actually more of a disadvantage for the two of them as they'll have to fight carefully. Observing from a safe distance, she's rather surprised. The boss is nowhere to be found among the group, which makes her wonder if it's hiding in its tent. If that is the case, it's good for them because this way, they'll be able to kill many of the henchmen before the elite ogre can confront them. To discuss battle strategy, Saria instructs her student to target the monsters from one side while she's going to cover the other side. Executing the plan right away, both of them bolt into action with their swords in hand. The showdown begins. Before the monsters are even capable of comprehending the situation, the majestic Saria is already on top of them, executing a clean headshot, making a football of the creature's head as it flops to the ground. With the first monster down, the rest of them grumble and roar at each other in their language. The entire group is enraged and goes right into murder mode, preparing their weapons to kill the intruders. But it doesn't matter as our boy is going beast mode with the way he's slaughtering the horde. This guy is a one-man army, cross-cutting multiple monsters all at once. The elegant Saria is all the same, showing off her impressive skills that she learned from Papa Virgil. The two of them are unstoppable. Gray and Saria perfectly cover each other's backs. Within the span of a few minutes, every single monster in sight is reduced to a body count for them. By the way, she's actually pretty impressed by Gray's unflinching determination in a real battle. He's never been more ready, warning his master to stay on her guard too. Here's the thing though. Something about the situation is giving him a bad feeling. This fight has been too easy for them. Way too easy, in fact, because if this is the level that Saria had to face, then she could have defeated all of them by herself even without his help. And that brings him to a state of unease because whatever is resting inside the tent, it's going to be much more terrifying than anything they've faced so far. Speaking of which, the creature's menacing pair of eyes beam through the dark tent, glaring at him from afar. The second Gray comes in contact with the creature's eyes. He shudders in shock. Despite his strength, he cowers and tells his master that they have to leave immediately. Even Saria doesn't get what's gotten into him all of a sudden. Without explaining anything, he roars at her to run with so much fear in his voice that Saria doesn't question him. She simply follows his instructions and bolts right after him. As they're running along, you might be thinking that they'll escape. But no, because their terrifying opponent literally leaps over from the skies with a massive vertical. Gray is terrified when the monster plants his feet into the ground, confronting the daring humans. Saria's expression changes to shock, pointing out how the boss monster has personally come to them for a battle. But then Gray drops a bombshell that no one even expected. This isn't the boss monster at all. Right as he's about to reveal the location of the real boss, a monstrous voice roars at them from behind. This provocative roar unleashes another horde of creatures to chase after them. The thrilling noise is deafening for Saria, but for the ogres, it has converted them into battle-hungry maniacs. Saria shivers in fear, failing to comprehend her own senses. There's a creature more terrifying, more brooding than an elite ogre, and it's commanding the entire group. Finally, Gray reveals that they're up against an ogre general. He's the real boss of the monster nest. I have to remind you guys, they're literally sandwiched right now. On one side, there's the elite ogre blocking their escape. Going back isn't an option either because a large horde awaits them along with the real boss of the nest. Saria expresses her shock, fully knowing that they can't face a monster like this even at their level. Their only chance at victory is to kill the elite ogre in front of them to escape. So she does exactly that by charging at the beast and clashing her weapon against his. Determined to win this battle, she exploits an opening and connects a sharp cut against the creature's body. Blood spurts out of the cut, and while normally this is supposed to be a good sign, her worries only worsen when she notices that the wound is healing again. Meanwhile, our boy is clashing against dozens of monsters all on his own, sharing his knowledge of the ogre general's abilities. Apparently, its roar significantly boosts the strength and recovery speed of the monsters. Basically, they're up against an elite ogre on steroids. Defeating even a normal one is so difficult right now that even Gray is having a hard time. Slashing one of the monsters, he tells Saria to cover his back. He instructs her to just delay the battle for a while longer, which makes her question what kind of miraculous strategies he's got planned. To that, our boy shares that in a situation like this, they've only got one objective in sight, and that is to kill the ugliest of them all, the bastard who's hiding behind his horde. The fight for survival begins as Gray clashes his sword against one of the monsters, reflecting his annoyance at getting surrounded and flanked. He deflects the slash and finds another raging monster aiming at him. He's cutting past the enemies, focusing on making a clear path in front of him so that he can get to his objective. In carelessness, however, he uses so much strength that it literally shatters his blade. This is genuinely troublesome because now he's left without the one weapon he's confident in. He dodges the enhanced ogre's downward slash and prioritizes his attention to drawing out his spare sword. Yeah, that's the smartest main character I've seen in a while. Carrying a second sword means being prepared. Anyway, Gray is worried that his blade won't hold up for long. Coming to his rescue, his master tosses her spare sword towards him, allowing him yet another chance at victory. With both spare swords in his hand, he has a better fighting chance. But still, even this won't be enough to kill every single one of these monsters. There's just too much friction in getting to the ogre general while at the same time defeating its minions. Trusting his abilities, this man goes batshit crazy, unleashing a super speed slash across his enemies. His forward momentum is broken when one of the ogres tries to attack him. Luckily, he dodges and then quickly blocks the attack. The fight is fatiguing him, but he still made significant progress dealing with the monsters in front of him. The ogre general feels threatened and decides to unleash a second monstrous roar. To Gray's horror, the strengthened creatures have just received yet another boost in strength. This guy is not having a good time as he's struggling even more now having to deal with them. Gray realizes that the ogre general is intelligent enough to see through his strategy. Now that it knows what the human is trying to do, the ogre general keeps on roaring to provoke his minions to fight. Blocking one of the strikes, Gray pushes past the monsters to bolt right ahead. A horde of monsters is ready to welcome him. Instead of facing off every single one, he efficiently cuts through the ones that are directly in his way. But even that leaves him with scratches and injuries all over his body. The bloodbath is wearing him down as he struggles to race past their endless barrage of attacks. Letting his guard down, he gets tackled by one of the ogres and pinned into place. Things seem to be looking really bad for him because the ogres have him right where they wanted. Luckily, since they're so enraged, they've lost the sense to cooperate because one of them slashes through one of its own kind without thinking. Gray internalizes that their strategy is to probably weaken his swords. While he's lost in thought, a Gigachad ogre loads a powerful fist to crush his head. It's a do-or-die situation, and he clearly can't let himself be hit, so he uses his sword to mitigate the damage. But even then, Bro is launched into the ground with a heavy crash just from the impact force. Finding himself at the edge of his life, this man still tries to get up in his broken state. That's the definition of a badass. With the previous attack destroying his spare sword, now he only has one sword left and dozens of ogres to slay as well as their boss. Once more, the situation isn't in his favor. In fact, it's nearly impossible to get out of this. Despite experiencing a regression, he fully understands his situation right now. Gray simply can't win, not against so many bloodthirsty monsters wearing him down. So he decides to switch his battle strategy, roaring at his master to run away while he can still make himself a decoy for her escape. Saria hears this and smiles, refusing to treat him like that. She's still facing off against the strengthened elite ogre, but Gray doesn't get why she's still determined to fight. He assures her to run away as he'll catch up soon after, but Saria refuses his suggestion, horrifically revealing that she has lost her ability to run. She suffered a major gash on her thigh, reducing Gray's hopes to ashes. Even that approach is out of the question now. There's no other path left except marching forward to his death. Swinging his blade in fury, he thinks about the reason why he regressed. Despite bearing such a heavy purpose, all of it is about to come to an end. Tragically, our boy's final sword also chips and shatters to pieces, and yet he finds himself in denial. Despite having lost his weapon, Gray refuses to consider this the ending to his life. If only he can use the power from the future, the terrifying ability that matched the Liquidator and was able to harm him. If he can use it even for a moment, then these monsters will be severed to pieces. Strongly envisioning the feeling he experienced that time, he loads his broken sword, entering a meditative state. And when he reopens his eyes, Gray is no longer the same weakling he was before. A single dark burning slash eviscerates the ogres, turning them to ashes with his burning black sword. Even Saria doesn't get what's going on. But it appears that our boy is still under control, as even after tapping into his dark powers, he gives her a smile of relief. In the next few seconds, Gray cuts every single creature in his sight, including the ogre general. Even his master can't comprehend what the hell just happened. She's too busy having to focus on the elite ogre in front of her. But now that the ogre general is killed, the strengthening abilities seem to have worn off. Saria understands that now she can easily kill the beast as it no longer has any capabilities to regenerate. Using a Walmart version of Judgment Cut End, she cuts the creature down, declaring that the elite ogre is nothing without its master. They won at last. Both of them managed to stand against all the odds and won the fight. Despite having miraculously pummeled through an entire horde of ogres, Gray still apologizes for breaking her sword. Saria tells him that it's nothing compared to saving her life in exchange. She collects the sword and wants to confront him for the technique he pulled at the end. But before she can finish her sentence, our boy flops to the ground, knocked fully unconscious because of the after effects, leaving his master to shout his name in concern. The perspective cuts to the inner mind of Gray. He questions his surroundings and spots nothing but a chained floating door in front of him. He's confused until the door releases the same kind of dark energy that he uses through his ability. A sudden realization dawns over him. This is his very own power. He wonders what would happen if he manages to break the door open. After all, he could obtain the power and make it his own. Determined to try, he marches forth. But the moment he takes his first step, a deathly sensation looms over his body, frightening the ever-living soul out of him, and that's only after taking one step. Gray is so struck with fear as he retreats his way back. He doesn't have all the answers regarding the source of his power, but one thing has been made very clear to him just now. If he dares to provoke the use of his powers in his current state, there's no doubt in hell that he'll die. And that's not just a light claim, because the feeling is so horrific that it drives him to tears. From the void, a voice creeps in his mind, commending him for his decision just now. Before Gray can process it any further, he wakes up in a panicking state in his bed. His master's right beside him, glad that he's finally awake. Worried, he asks where he's at. She explains that she brought him to the village's infirmary as fast as she could. This dude was actually knocked out for 5 whole days, and I'm so glad that the author didn't say 3 days like all the other stories. Anyway, she was afraid for his life while Gray is having to cope with the fact that he had to recover for nearly a week because of the burden of the technique he used. Even Saria thinks that he went above and beyond in that battle. It was the definition of defying all odds. Still, she's concerned about the state of his body and asks if he's capable of moving well. To test it out, our boy tries to lift his arm, but he can't do shit. He can barely use it after expending much energy. But with the way he is right now, there's no way he can hold a sword with an injury like this. Well, actually, there's no way he'd ever be able to rub one off either, so he gotta fix this problem fast. Then there's the bruise on his arm left after the battle. Saria grows concerned for his condition, knowing that he's unable to move his body well. Gray confirms that he's helpless right now. Even his master admits that his arm won't return to normal so soon, revealing that every single bone in his arm has been shattered to pieces. This revelation surprises our boy because, in a strange way, he doesn't feel any pain. That's actually thanks to the magic potion treatment he received. Our boy's jaw hits the floor because these things are supposed to be really damn expensive, and she just used one on him. Saria explains that it's nothing to worry about as the village chief personally rewarded them with it. The kid can't believe what he's hearing. He doesn't even know the village chief personally, and he's received a magic potion at his expense. Saria thinks he's dense for being unable to understand his situation. So she puts it in bold words. Gray is officially the savior and the hero of the village. Before he can grapple with what she just said, the village chief barges in to greet the boy, thanking him for everything he did. To point out the greatness of his feat, the village chief reminds the kid that an ogre general is so strong that it takes an entire town to fight against even one. That kind of creature threatened their village, and yet one boy was able to pummel his way through, carving a path and killing the monster, ensuring the village's safety. For that, the village chief is grateful. It's thanks to the valiant efforts of the boy and his master that their lives are no longer threatened. Unable to accept all the credit, Gray argues that they're exaggerating what he did, but the village chief thinks that it's him who is undermining what he did. Thinking about it for a moment, Gray reflects on the outcome. He thinks that maybe the village chief's words are right. Remember his previous life? In that life, this place burned to the ground because of the ogres raiding it down to ashes. That's the significance of his accomplishment. The leader of the village is more than happy to give him a long explanation on what makes him so great, but for now, he's focused on the boy's mission to pass the entrance exam for the World Union Academy. Speaking of which, Gray just remembered his true goal. He carelessly went to kill the creatures in the monster nest just weeks before his exam. With all the time that was wasted in between, he's only got 2 days left until the day of the exam. Oh, and by the way, just getting there takes 3 whole days on foot. His best option would be to use a horse to traverse the distance on time, but he's dead broke and doesn't have the money to afford one. Making a sudden request, he begs the village chief to lend him a horse for the journey. The good thing is that the leader was already expecting the kid to make such a request, which is why he's already prepared the best horse for his travels. Saria smiles, revealing that their original plan was to carry him even if he hadn't woken up today. Some people truly support you despite your troubles, just like Gray's friends here, and I hope we encounter more of them in our lives too. Gray exits the infirmary only to find the entire village roaring the boy's name and rooting for his exam. They want him to do his best, and they're not afraid of thanking him for what he did. The villagers even support him with a bag of money. Everyone donated bit by bit so that he can apply for the entrance exam and support himself at the academy. The boy is eternally grateful for the villagers who showed him so much love with their support. He also jokingly states that it's going to be really embarrassing if he fails and comes back. But Saria is absurdly confident in her student, emphasizing that the applicants applying for the entrance exam aren't capable of beating an ogre general all on their own. But that's not the only concern. The boy is worried about his arm as it's still messed up and there's no telling when it will heal. To that, his master argues that he should make use of his left arm in the meantime. Even though his left arm is fully functioning, it's just that he's more used to his right. But his teacher thinks with his skill level it won't matter. Gray shares his concerns, stating that the level of the entrance exam may be overwhelming for him to the point one arm will hinder him. But even then, Saria understands that the teachers or the examiners at the academy have a sharp eye. When they see his talent, they'll select him. The boy mounts his horse while his teacher confidently declares that he's going to pass. That's the only outcome. Thanking her for everything she's done, he promises not to fail. Recalling how the village was razed to the ground in his previous life, he's happy that these people got a second chance alongside him. The world is already changing from this moment onwards, and he's going to make sure to influence the future with his new power. In the next scene, our boy finally makes his way to his destination. Staring ahead, he locks eyes with the grandeur of the World Union Academy. In the arena, the examiner announces the distribution of the exam tickets. All of the candidates will remain in the arena. From the looks of it, there's a large number of applicants, but only a tiny number of 20 are going to reserve a spot in class. They bicker about the changing number of seats each year because in some years, the academy even accepted 50 people, while in rare cases it only accepted one. So the rules for selection aren't absolute apparently. Anyway, Professor Ariel takes the limelight and comes to the front. She addresses the examinees and explains that they'll have to collect the paper being presented. With a snap of her fingers, a vortex of yellow opens, releasing magical energy and automatically manifesting the tickets in each examinee's hand. Our boy collects his ticket. His examinee number is 513 for the fencing course. Professor Ariel adds that their ticket shares only the most critical details, but it's nothing to be worried about as the process is the same each year. She also confirms that the academy doesn't care about one's age or gender, their nationality or class. In other words, they quite literally don't give a flying fuck if you're an attack helicopter or not. They don't even care enough to know their names. The candidates who are destined to pass will be asked for further information. But for the total examinees here, it doesn't matter. Professor Ariel even confirms that it's fine if they offer a fake name, once again proving the academy doesn't care. Anyway, trouble seeks our boy again because he came here without his sword today, and yet he's placed in the fencing course. It makes him question the system's legitimacy. Professor Ariel continues, hilariously stating that she assigned each person a course based on their looks. I know she's supposed to be perceptive or something, but it's just funny how 1 minute ago she was talking about discrimination. And then she goes on to say this, Ariel is fine with correcting course details in case she got them wrong. Even the examinees think that it's impossible to assign a course based on-site alone, especially when there's so many of them. They strongly suspect that the academy must have investigated them beforehand, so that's how they know. The possibility of mind-reading magic also comes up. Professor Ariel doesn't address any of their concerns. All she's noticing is how no one is complaining about the assigned course. So next, she decides to reveal everyone's exam schedule. The detail is imprinted on the ticket at once. Gray is nervous because he's scheduled to have his exam on the first day, not allowing him any time to let his arm heal. Ariel reveals that this exam will only be conducted once, and it will decide everything. If a candidate is late, immediate disqualification will be the only outcome. She also reminds them that their schedules are strict and won't be manipulated or disputed upon request. It's bad news for Gray, who is struggling with his recovery. He's begging for his body to pull a miracle and heal him tomorrow. The next day arrives, and what do you know? Poor guy's arm didn't even heal a bit. He's got no choice but to take the exam in this condition. Gray's examinee number is called, and he frustratingly steps forth. He tries to calm himself in an effort to remain optimistic about the situation. Assessing his left arm, he doesn't appear to have any issues, and he can also move his right arm if he exerts enough strength. His current strategy is to sharply observe the examiner's moves and discover a winning strategy from that. He's watching a match between a candidate and an examiner. The applicant blindly rushes to attack, but by the end of his attack, the examiner is unfazed and casually stands waiting for his next move. The candidate drags his sword for yet another slash, but even that strike is helpless. He gets blocked, and not just that. The examiner deflects his blade before sending him flying with a final blow. With his body hitting the ground, the examiner concludes the result of the exam, instructing him to exit the venue. You guys might be thinking that maybe Gray has found something, but the hilarious part is how this man literally gives up and accepts that he's about to get his ass cooked. His number is called to step into the arena. Gray reflects his chances, realizing that he clearly can't beat an examiner that annihilated a candidate even bigger than him. Inside the arena, our boy is granted the freedom to make the first move. Despite that, he fully understands that this battle will be one-sided. Even then, he's got to make some kind of impression. The fight begins with Gray rushing to strike. He remembers his master's advice, who told him to make use of his entire body to deliver a potent slash, rather than just using his arms. Channeling her advice into motion, he thinks that the only way he can cope with the loss of his right arm is to use his other muscles instead. And so he delivers the first swing, which the examiner easily dodges. Even now, Gray finds himself struggling to fight in his usual style. After all, even though he's trying to make up for his right arm, it still doesn't change the fact that he's at a major disadvantage here. The examiner retaliates by trying to cut him down. But to Gray's astonishment, the sword is moving far too slow. It's as if he can read its trajectory without having to rush. So our boy actually blocks the attack successfully, still feeling the weight of the examiner's force behind the attack. At the same time, he judges that the examiner's technique isn't as refined as Saria. So if he can just focus on the techniques he learned from her, there's a chance he may be able to exploit an opportunity and carve an opening. With that strategy in mind, Gray rushes in full force in an effort to overwhelm the instructor. Oh, and the instructor is actually being pushed back. His speed is his own demise. Gray finds himself becoming confident, realizing that he can easily take down this examiner. The words of his master flash through his mind again. Their blades clash once more, but Gray overwhelms his opponent with a full deflect, ready to finish the battle with his new confidence. Gray continued his relentless assault while the instructor tried his hardest to wrestle control of the pace. Although our boy had seen through the opponent's technique, neutralizing it with a handicap is still a tough task. He exploited the speed gap and snuck a straight stab only to get curved. The difference in raw power was simply too great. Breaking the instructor's form is easier said than done with two hands, let alone one. With that said, Gray's aggression was turning the nerd's movements rougher bit by bit. It would be a bit risky, but he can push his luck here. With a clear plan in mind, Gray let the instructor push him to the edge of the stage, exposing a massive gap in defense. As expected, Glasses took the bait and pounced for a finishing blow. The instructor fell for the oldest trick in the book. He made a wide-open swing as Gray anticipated. The young warrior adjusted his stance and let the swing come. Nothing is more likely to expose an opening than a reckless and greedy push. A big and predictable swing was precisely what he needed to use his speed advantage. In an instant, he reached the instructor's vulnerable flank. No matter how great the difference in power is, you can't defend against a vicious blow from behind. Milliseconds away from thrusting his sword for the win, the referee stepped in to signal the end of the fight. Gray held back and lowered his blade. The match is over, but it felt a little too short. With the time limit for the exam elapsed, the referee announced the fight's result as a draw. The young man grits his teeth in frustration. He failed. After all the hard work he put in, he could not get it done. He held his trusty blade tightly for a moment before relaxing his grip. Gray walked away from the stage and accepted the result with grace. He did his best. If he can't even win against an instructor, injury or not, his lofty goals are farther than he expected. Looking at the bright side, his arm should be healed by next year so he can be at a 100% for a retake of the entrance exam. No matter the result, this was a valuable experience deserving of gratitude. A week has passed since Gray narrowly missed the win against that Glasses guy. Today, the World Union Academy faculty gathered in meeting room 53 to discuss the entrance exam results. White-haired Gramps initiated the meeting by letting his colleagues freely express their thoughts on this year's batch. Immediately, moans of complaints filled the room. For this year, they devised a method for every professor to observe the exams together. It was rather inefficient and tedious. Of course, there are some who liked the format. They cannot afford to overlook a promising talent simply for the sake of the faculty's convenience after all. Gramps steered the discussion away from the exam system and back to the hopeful students. Starting with the swordsmanship course, he summoned magical recordings of every examinee to evaluate those who passed one last time. Naturally, those who outrightly beat the examiner passed. Those who could not get the job done will be evaluated based on the qualities they showed and how they held out during those 15 minutes of clashing. Other than those who mopped the floor with the instructor, they narrowed down the standout candidates to numbers 5, 217, and 753. Everybody agreed to draw the line with just those three. If they add more inferior talents, those poor kids would not be able to keep up in class. No one opposed the line drawn, so the successful candidates for the swordsmanship course have been confirmed and locked in, or at least it was supposed to be, until a playful voice brought up candidate number 513, Gray Lee. It came from none other than the enigmatic red-haired Professor Ariel. Since she mentioned an unfamiliar number, the other professors pulled up the footage. They had to admit that given another second, the young man would have likely won, but he relied on setting up traps just to beat an examiner. The academy might prove too difficult for the guy. Those with trained eyes for swordsmanship could see the solid technique, the lack of power, and the clear mismatch from the start until the end. In conclusion, the professors of the swordsmanship course dismissed the idea of accepting candidate 513 to the academy. While they were busy mocking the kid's flaws, Professor Ariel looked at her coworkers like they were dumbass bums. Every single person in this room watched the footage, yet not a single one of them noticed what she did. If everyone's this blind, maybe the exam's format really is a waste of time. The day after the final deliberation, the examinees were called back to the town square. They were tasked to gather at 11 in the morning. Tensions were high, and everyone was hoping to get the coveted acceptance. The time has finally come. An academy representative loudly announced that 6 candidates had passed the swordsmanship course. Everyone held their slips and prayed to be one of the 6. The first ones called were candidates number 5 and 217. Immediately, their paper slips burned to nothing. Next were candidates number 432, 615, 753, and 925. That is all. Out of hundreds, only 6 were skilled enough to get accepted to the world's most prestigious training institute. Gray came today with a little bit of hope, only to get utterly crushed by the reality that he might not be good enough. The successful candidates were instructed to cross the bridge and complete the enrollment procedure by the end of the day. Those who passed were naturally giddy and excited to enter the life of an elite. Those who flopped looked down in disappointment, wallowing in their failure. With the swordsmanship course out of the way, the representative surprisingly announced that one examinee has been selected by the Divine Eye Special Admission. Of course, it's none other than candidate number 51 and 3, Gray Mother Freaking Lee. His paper slip burned a different shade than the ones that came before him. The bright blue flame inevitably attracted everyone's attention. Just when he thought he would have to train and rehabilitate his injury for another year, Gray was given a pass. Other candidates around him mockingly laughed upon hearing the mention of the Divine Eye Special Admission. Gray had no idea what he had just gotten into. This is the first time he had ever heard about this Divine Eye business. Almost everyone sees this as a bullshit admission, just a way to get someone unworthy through a backdoor, a sign of World Union Academy's decline. Hearing the vitriolic chatter around him, Gray did not like the sound of being called a backdoor student. He wondered how he was even selected when he didn't have any relevant connections. His master could not possibly have this kind of pull in the academy. While the failures were mocking the one guy admitted through the Divine Eye, a bald old hermit scolded them for disrespecting a long-standing tradition. The way the bald hermit sees it, this admission is an honorable category that has produced countless heroes for over a century now. As expected, the failures also mocked the hermit for being behind the times. Sure, the Divine Eye was hailed as the birthing place of heroes back in the day, but not anymore. Recent Divine Eye candidates include Amy White, Bella Albright, Leek Muller, and Jacob Bloomfield. These 4 have one thing in common. Everyone sees them as complete and utter failures, but we already heard those names. In the near future, Amy White will advance to become the Sword Saint. Bella Albright would become the great sage, and Jacob Bloomfield would take up the mantle of the divine archer. These three would reach the apex of their craft as the main force against the liquidator. Now Grally's name will be mentioned alongside these legends. Those who passed were welcomed and provided with uniforms to change into. The entrance ceremony will soon begin, and the rookies must assemble in the plaza in front of the main office. Gray tried his new drip on, and it was a perfect fit. His black blazer inlaid with gold in the Academy's crest was clean as hell. He went from feeling defeated to feeling dapper alongside his batchmates. When they reached the plaza, some of the rookies were confused. There was nothing in there. The confusion was cleared up when an Academy staff member ran towards them with an apologetic expression. He explained that there's been a bit of a delay setting up the ceremony due to a mix-up. Thankfully, it won't take long to fix that. To do so, the rookies must step back a little farther so the setup can be placed. The rookies followed the staff member's instructions and watched with skepticism. Mr. Staff kneeled down and started tinkering with the ground. After a little bit of preparation, he touched the floor and activated a massive magic circle in the blink of an eye. Out of nowhere, hundreds of seats arranged in a coliseum style emerged from the magic circle. The rookies were flabbergasted. They had never seen magic of this scale before. In just a few seconds, the plaza turned into a proper arena complete with seats and a stage. Mr. Staff apologized for the delay once more and instructed the rookies to sit wherever they liked. Still shaken by the absurd display of magic, they followed suit. Some of the more knowledgeable rookies recognized the use of teleportation magic to literally spawn an arena. Gray quietly took a seat in the middle row. He reckoned that this was the Academy's way of conducting a grandiose entrance ceremony near the school building. They are basically flexing the power of the World Union Academy. Once everyone was seated, other rookies commented that the number of seats was a bit excessive. There were only 30 of them in attendance, yet there were hundreds of seats. Well, that's because, as the World Union Academy's name suggests, this institute gathers the cream of the crop from all over the world. If you look up in the sky, you will see what that really means. Dozens of airships and dragon carriages flew overhead, blanketing the sun. Looking up, Gray recognized the biggest magic airship as the Strato Queen. He had once boarded this hulking beast when he was cannon fodder for the Liquidator Subjugation Squad. It really lives up to its reputation. Bringing out something so imposing for a simple entrance ceremony is just another way to flex on newbies. The World Union Academy sure knows how to flaunt its power. Once every ship had landed safely, students who passed the strict entrance exam in their own corners of the world stepped out. They took the remaining seats, filling up the stands. With everyone gathered, it's time to get started. The staff member who spawned the arena signaled the start of the rest of their lives. After all the flashy displays of influence, the entrance exam proceeded with a brief speech courtesy of the headmaster. Gray was feeling a little bored in his seat. Even though he's entering the most prestigious academy in the world, this whole ceremony felt like just another tedious assembly. Next up, the headmaster called the top students from each course to the podium. The guy sitting beside Gray stood up. Blondie's name is Leon Hart, the top student of the swordsmanship course. As he confidently descended the stairs, gossip about his incredible feat of defeating the examiner in an instant started to spread. Some even say that this rookie is already as good as any of the professors when it comes to swordplay. Leonard Apius looks like he's a spy tasked with starting a fake family with an assassin and a little girl who can read minds. Gray was not impressed, just a little curious. Before starting his speech, Leonard confirmed that he was allowed to speak freely from the heart. Once given the go signal, he turned to his fellow rookies with a sharp gaze. He opened his speech by lodging a formal complaint to the Academy. First of all, he congratulated his peers who were admitted the proper way. He sees it as a huge honor to be among the best of the current generation. Leonard hopes that they all graduate as people capable of making meaningful contributions to the world. For that, they must work together. He looks forward to the day when he and his peers soar as proud students of the prestigious World Union Academy. With that out of the way, he pointed out that there was someone among us, someone who doesn't deserve to be in this plaza at all. He directed this accusation directly to Professor Ariel, who oversees the special admissions of the Divine Eye. She was quite shocked to be called out by a freshman on the first day of classes. Professor Ariel asserted that every single student here has passed the rigorous exam. They may not be as dominant as Leonhardt, but they showed that they rightfully belong. Curious and fascinated, she asked the cocky rookie why he was yapping like a little bitch. Without mincing his words, Leonhardt candidly brought up the mystery candidate who was admitted through an obsolete backdoor system. Like everyone else, he sees the Divine Eye special admission as just a way to sneak underqualified students into the academy. Leonhardt roared that the specially admitted student should just show themselves, return the honorable uniform, and leave in shame. His words and decisiveness seemed to move the other rookies. Meanwhile, the one being singled out was trying to not stand out. Thankfully, that hostile overachiever doesn't know Gray's face. If he just stays silent, he shouldn't get in trouble, right? Professor Ariel had to step in and break the tension, praising this year's batch for their liveliness. Refusing to stand down, Leonhardt doubled down on his opinions about admitting students through an outdated course. Growing a little annoyed with Blondie, Professor Ariel ominously asked if he was confident that he could beat the kid she selected for her course. Leon had to take a few steps back upon feeling the pressure from the enigmatic professor. He tried to stammer a reply, but he couldn't. Gritting his teeth and composing himself, Leonhardt confidently answered that he could beat the dog shit out of that unqualified student. Ariel was already expecting such a reply. She likes boys with attitude, so she proposed a wager. She would willingly put her job on the line and that kid's future in this academy at stake. Gray doesn't like that sound of that bet at all. Leonhardt asked if this wager would be a straight-up brawl with the special admission kid, but Professor Ariel wouldn't do such a boring and boorish thing. She's also certain that if her boy goes all out, little Leon would end up dead in a ditch. As an educator, she can't possibly put a promising student's life at risk. Her words cut through Leonhardt's pride like a hot knife through butter. If she was trying to rage bait him into making a bet, it certainly worked. Professor Ariel proposed that they make the wager about monster subjugation instead. That way, it will be a little safer for every party involved. Besides, she knows that Leonhardt excels at fighting monsters more than against humans. The details are simple. Both participants must kill the monsters she picks as targets. Each round, the target monster will increase in strength. Whoever gives up first and fails to subjugate the target loses. If her boy loses, she will gladly retire from her respected position as professor, and she will expel every special admission student under her care. But if little Leon loses, he'll have to do whatever she says. I know a lot of you would accept being red-haired professor's slave in a heartbeat. Before accepting, Leonard asked what the first target monster would be. Although he's confident that he can handle and execute any opponent, he'd rather not be caught up in some weird shit. After a little deliberation, she came up with the perfect first target. She wants the head of an ogre general on her desk. If it's too easy for little Leon, she would gladly increase the difficulty. But based on the crowd's reaction, there's no need for that. While everyone was calling her demands over the top, Gray was trying to figure out why she would pick an ogre general, specifically, a monster he had already slain. Leon, on the other hand, banged his fist on the podium. He vehemently argued that an ogre general is not a monster that someone can subjugate on a solo run. Seeing Blondie protest, she lowered the difficulty and set the time frame for the whole year. Little Leon still refused to play along. He argued that if someone could single-handedly kill a disaster-level monster with just a year of training, people wouldn't suffer. If they are to go through with this absurd bet, this pussy demanded a more realistic target. Then he got it through his head that this clever woman deliberately chose a monster no one can defeat so they can end the bet without a clear winner. Since he kept on bitching, Professor Ariel relented and added one more stipulation to the bet. If it results in a draw, little Leon wins. In other words, if her boy fails to defeat the ogre general within a year, she will gladly step down and expel all her special students. With all the stipulations to give Leon as much advantage as possible, he will look like a pussy if he still refuses. Knockoff Lloyd Forger has to realize that he's being played here, and the outcome is already decided. But he was swept by the professor's manipulation, forced to accept a seemingly airtight wager. For the record, he asked if a weakened or injured General Ogre would count. It goes without saying that the monster has to be in its natural fighting form. To seal the deal, the eye under the professor's monocle glowed as her magic formed a contract. Every detail has been listed and imprinted in the magic contract. All little Leon has to do is sign it if he's ready. With the entire faculty and every other freshman as witnesses, he willingly signed his name on the arcane document. After finalizing the deal, he hesitantly asked if the kid admitted through the back door could seriously win. Professor Ariel didn't bother giving him a straight answer. The other professors just watched in their seats, seemingly used to the old red-haired raccoon's shenanigans. They all see her as a mage well past her prime, bored and just doing random stuff for shits and giggles. In his seat, Gray sighed in defeat as the bet to determine his future was officialized out of his control. He also noticed that she deliberately worded the stipulations to include the ogre general he killed in the time frame. This bet was a done deal the moment it began. Professor Ariel played Leon and everyone else, and Gray was the only one who saw it. She sure plays dirty, but having someone like that on your corner is a massive boon. After the bet fiasco, the entrance ceremony concluded, and the rookies were funneled into their first lecture, The Basics of Magic. The professor in charge of the class acknowledged that it's a bit surprising to start a lecture on the very first day of classes. He wanted his students to get used to this pace. In this academy, they cannot afford to waste a single day. Today, they will start with the most basic of basics, the simple utilization of magic. Within a human's body lies an invisible energy called ether. One can manipulate the magic circuits in the body and tap into untold amounts of power. Gray was initially afraid that he wouldn't be able to keep up with the classes, but this first lecture looked manageable. He already heard the same explanations back at the subjugation boot camp. Nevertheless, he was unlucky with his class assignment. Out of all the introductory classes in magic, he ended up in the same class as Leonard Apius. If people find out that he's the hated Divine Eyes special admission student, he can kiss his peace goodbye. While he was lost in thought, the professor noticed and singled him out for looking bored by the lecture. The professor felt offended that a rookie was already looking away less than 5 minutes into his introductory course. Gray immediately apologized for his wandering gaze. Still, he found it weird that the professor singled him out even though he was all the way at the very back of the lecture hall. The professor escalated the situation and demanded a demonstration from the distracted student. If he looks bored in an introductory class, that must mean he can use basic magic, right? Gray wasn't easy to bully. Respectfully, he insisted that he specializes in swordsmanship. He thought it would be fine if he couldn't use magic. The professor barked that even if one uses a sword in a real fight, a fighter still needs to learn the basics to coordinate with an allied mage. Learning the basics of magic and grasping how it feels is the least a swordsman can do. At that moment, Gray remembered hearing the same thing from the boot camp lectures. In that case, today's lecture might conclude with the same spell. To confirm, he asked today's lecture is aimed at learning the simple yet effective ether bullet. Since he knows the name, the professor assumed that he could use it. Gray thanked the gods for the hellish boot camp he had to grind through. Since this would be a good opportunity for a proper demonstration, the professor decided to make this a one-on-one match and called this year's top swordsman, Leon, up to the stage. Blondie gladly stood up and paid his respects to the professor. With that said, he explained that he was trained in sword and magic before he even started school, so it might be a little risky for a normie to go up against him. The professor asserted that no matter how big the skill gap is, ether bullets are non-lethal, so there's no need to hold back. In addition, he revealed that Gray is this year's Divine Eye student, knowing how much Leon despises the nameless backdoor student. Every student in the lecture hall turned to Gray, committing his face to their memories. This was a setup from the very start. He couldn't even get through the day without being doxxed by a freaking professor. That old fart deliberately revealed his identity with nefarious intent. Hearing that he has a chance to shoot a literal bullet through the guy he hates, Leon readily accepted to show a backdoor baby the ropes. This is an opportunity to show an unqualified outsider what kind of place World Union Academy really is. With his veins popping out in rage, he demanded that Gray step the fuck down. This is not how our boy's first day was supposed to go. In the stage, they stood opposite each other while the shit-stirrer professor explained the rules. He will give a signal, and both parties will shoot ether bullets at their opponent. Gray only spent a few days learning basic magic at the boot camp. Sure, the professor said that the bullets are not lethal, but that doesn't mean they would not hurt. As soon as the go signal was given, Leon Hart gathered a hefty amount of ether in his hands, determined to show the difference in strength between a real and fake student. Pushed to the corner and forced to protect himself, Gray also gathered and manipulated his ether. Throwing his prior knowledge into one desperate attempt, the whole lecture hall fell silent when they laid eyes upon a massive black hole threatening to swallow a teeny little bullet. Both Leon and Gray were flabbergasted. Neither of them expected this shit. As expected, the tiny ether bullet was completely consumed by the raging black hole. Leon's fear was evident in his eyes as the obviously lethal spell inches closer to him. In a panic, the professor raised his hand and tried his hardest to prevent the worst-case scenario using his own magic. A golden barrier blocked the seemingly relentless advance of the anomalous ether bullet. It managed to blunt most of the force driving the attack, but it was a very close call. He made the mistake of letting up, and the golden barrier started showing dangerous cracks under pressure. Eventually, the bullet black hole reached its limit and exploded, shattering the magic barrier into a million little specks of light. The resulting boom threw the lecture hall into chaos. Rookies closed their eyes and braced themselves for impact. As for the target himself, little Leon was knocked down on his ass, screaming bloody murder. Realizing that he messed up, the professor immediately ran towards the swordsmanship course's rising star to make sure he's alright. Leon picked himself back up, wiped the dust, and assured the professor that he was fine. After ascertaining Blondie's well-being, the professor turned his attention to the one who almost blew the whole place up. Had the barrier failed to dampen the impact, that abnormal bullet could have killed Leon and injured many. Even amongst veteran magic professors, no one could cast an ether bullet that strong in the academy. He desperately wanted to know what the young man did to produce such a destructive output. Gray himself was confused. What he just unleashed was definitely on another level compared to the feeble beam that his opponent threw. Could the spell he learned as part of the subjugation squad differ from the one that they teach at the academy? He asked the professor if he had messed up in any way, but the geezer was fairly certain that what he shot was definitely an ether bullet. The only glaring difference was the quality of the spell. What Gray just used to juice up the spell was not normal. That size and power can only be achieved through the use of supercompressed ether. None of the rookies has heard, let alone understood the term. Supercompressed ether is something that even experienced professors have trouble producing and studying, yet this controversial student casually used it to reform a basic spell. No one in this academy can replicate that. Now the students are starting to feel respect and a bit of fear for the guy who has been admitted through the divine eye. They also protested that Gray should have been enrolled in the magic course instead. As far as he remembers, all spells learned by the subjugation squad were precisely like the one he just used. Among the group, Gray was one of those who had no aptitude for it. Still refusing to believe that he's using some sort of juiced-up ether, he summoned another ether bullet and insisted that pulling off something like this is possible for anyone with enough practice. Much to his confusion, the professor just laughed like a madman in response. Gray didn't know what to do, so he just stood there dumbfoundedly. The professor shifted his tone entirely. At the start of the class, he was blatantly hostile. Now he's trying to recruit the special admission student into the magic course. Gray respectfully declined the enthusiastic invitation. He was always told that he had no talent for magic, so he couldn't see himself getting into it now. The professor found this refusal preposterous. If a young man who can produce supercompressed ether through compression is talentless, then everyone else should just quit magic. He even went as far as dubbing Gray an unparalleled prodigy even by the academy standard. Whoever said that the kid had no talent for magic must be smoking some illegal substances. The rookies watched the scene in silence. They saw how the strict professor turned into a completely different person as he desperately tried to convince Gray to shift into the magic department. From his perspective, it would be a huge loss for the world if Gray didn't pursue magic. Hell, it would be a crime against the arcane. With all the glazing coming his way, all the young man could do was laugh at the absurdity. Then he remembered hearing the term compression technique once before. It was just another clear day at the boot camp, and one of the heroes was conducting a lecture. She chronicled how in the past, people didn't know OD, also known as life force, existed. Due to that gap in knowledge, it was very difficult to cast proper magic. One must continuously compress ether within the body to achieve the desired effect through a spell. This primitive method only gathers a tiny bit of OD. Miss Lecturer Bella Albright, the great sage, and the strongest mage of the future found the way they practiced magic just a decade ago laughable. Gray asked the professor if he had ever heard of OD. The question stumped the old man. He was not familiar with the term at all. Judging by that reaction, it sounds like the world still hasn't discovered this revolutionary magic concept at this point in time. If that's the case, then the basic stuff Gray learned in the subjugation squad can be considered knowledge from the future. He finally realized that he must be careful not to leak this type of information. For one last time, he refused the incessant offer to transfer to a different course. His true love is the sword, so he would have to pass. The professor sighed in defeat and helplessly accepted the young man's decision to stick with blades. But he also left Gray an open-door invitation to shift apartments whenever he feels like it. Feeling a headache coming on, the young man awkwardly thanked the animated geezer for the generous offer. After that demonstration, both participants were asked to go back to their seats. The professor promised to never chide Gray anymore during class. In fact, he wouldn't mind if the kid left if he ever got bored. The professor believes that this baby stuff is far too basic for a prodigy like Gray. Gray descended the stairs while subjected to hostile glares. Now he's ascending with reverence from the professor and his peers. Meanwhile, his victim was still standing on the ruined stage, blushing and feeling his lionheart beating fast for Lord Gray. He didn't see how Lionheart looked down there, but Gray certainly felt the chill coming up his spine. After the first lecture, he received a personal note from Professor Ariel asking him to meet at her office after classes. He basically got summoned out of the blue. It would be troublesome if old Professor Carlos were behind this sudden summons. After walking around for a few minutes, he finally found the office door that bears the mark of the divine eye. He intended to knock, but the door softly opened, gently letting him in. Taking the unlocked door as an invitation, Gray respectfully entered while uttering respectful greetings. Before he could finish his sentence, he sensed a sharp blade coming his way from the side. Gray's reflexes automatically kicked in as he drew his sword to defend. The grip was a little unorthodox, but it got the job done in a pinch. He was able to sweep the sneak attack and the attacker away. With the attacker swatted away, Gray realized that he had moved purely on instinct this time around. He wanted to confront the assailant, but it was just a blue-haired young woman who couldn't even grip the sword in her hand properly. Upon closer look, Gray realized that he knew this girl all too well. This shorty will become an unshakable pillar of humanity and hope in the future. Gray's attention was then directed to the desk in the back of the office, and the woman sitting on it praised his quick response. Professor Ariel was pleased to confirm that her eyes were right on when he evaluated the young man in the entrance exam. There were two other men in the room, Ariel's fellow professors, who were still skeptical of the new addition to the divine eye. They evaluated Bella's movements as flawless, but her sword was knocked out of her hand way too easily. Hearing the name, Gray's previous life memory of the ultimate mage came rushing back. Who would have thought that the sorceress would look so quaint in her younger years? Meanwhile, Ariel is hassling her colleagues to just admit that they were wrong instead of making excuses. In the end, the other professors ponied up and gave their gambling addict coworker her winnings. They observed the split-second exchange in the door and had to admit that Gray was here for a reason. Confused and uncomfortable, the young man asked what was happening and why he was called on. Ariel simply explained that they were betting on whether the new kid could fend off a surprise attack from Bella or not. Thanks to that, she made some good money today. As thanks, she tossed a portion of her winnings to her new student. He promptly caught the coin and found a glimmering gold piece in his hand. A single gold coin is practically a small fortune. Although they admittedly lost the wager, the other professors also brought up a glaring detail they had missed in the entrance exam. From that exchange earlier, they became certain that the young man deliberately avoided using his dominant arm to defend. It was almost as if he was trying to protect an immobile arm. The most likely explanation for that quirk would be an injury. But rather than an apparent physical injury to the muscles that any professor would see through, this kid is suffering from a deeper kind of wound. A simple injury would not cause someone to tense up in such an unfamiliarly hostile ambush. Gray was surprised that the professors had deduced so many details correctly just by watching him draw his blade to defend. Well, they are educators in the most prestigious educational institution for a reason. Though they were slower to notice compared to Ariel, they still inferred a clear picture. With that being said, Ariel shooed her co-workers away now that she had their money. Missed out on a rare find, and she won't give Gray up. For now, the professors would gladly admit that the kid has potential. But if that wound doesn't heal and continues to fester, Gray will remain as the guy who failed to meet the academy standard but was accepted anyway. He did not like the threatening cut of that professor's tongue at all. When the skeptical professors vacated the office, only Ariel and her students remained inside. With the nuisances out of the way, it's time to start the real agenda of this summons. She called him today to discuss the topic of magic. After serving some aromatic tea, Professor Ariel reiterated what she heard happened in Professor Carlos's class. She found out from the man himself that persistent idiot stormed into her office demanding the new kids transfer to the magic course. She obviously declined such a ridiculous request. In her scrutinizing eyes, Gray would become a much scarier beast, wielding a sword rather than magic. Upon removing her monocle to elaborate on what she meant by that, Gray was stunned. Professor Ariel doesn't see signs of a genius in magic compression at all. He doesn't even show signs of having practiced magic on a deeper level. Gray felt a little unsettled after getting scanned and read like an open book with that bizarre eye. Seeing his lying would be utterly useless in this situation, Gray admitted that all of what she speculated was correct. Curious, she gently asked if he would be willing to share the trick used to conjure that black hole ether bullet. She promised complete discretion and a reward in exchange for that valuable info. She really wanted to know about this promising concept for Bella's sake. While sipping on tea, Gray's tongue almost slipped and called the young Bella by her future title. Professor Ariel called the young woman a pure genius when it comes to magic theory without the means to wield what she can theorize. For some unknown reason, she has no capacity to use ether compression, let alone the mythical supercompression. Based on some loose intel from the future, he knew that Bella Albright was a late bloomer. Her lack of talent in the practical department must be the reason. Ariel set this meeting up after she heard about the supercompressed bullet that nearly killed Leon. If there is a way to use supercompressed ether without the inefficient act of internal compression, it would be a game changer. Professor Ariel is desperate for solutions. She doesn't want to see one of her girls sent to Professor Bradley. Everyone in the future would know that accursed name. It's impossible not to be aware of an extremely infamous grade A bastard. He conducted countless independent human experiments for the sake of advancing his field, murdering many in the process. On top of that, he would cause cataclysmic magic disasters that would claim the lives of tens of thousands. Professor Bradley is history's worst magic criminal in existence. In this era, the deranged mass-murdering magical terrorist hasn't been caught yet. If Bella can't create supercompressed ether by the end of the year, she will be sent to the deranged professor to undergo a high-risk surgery. Anyone with common sense would see this as a bad idea. Professor Ariel could not agree more. Though the surgery is under the pretense of enhancing magic abilities, it's just blatant human experimentation with no certainty. It hasn't been made public yet, but she's already hearing rumors of the lunatic's inhumane crimes. Some victims have died while others were left broken beyond hope. Bella chimed in that, although it's dangerous and scary, she will be expelled by the end of the year if she doesn't produce any results. In all honesty, Professor Ariel would rather have her girl quit magic in the academy for good than have that perv mess with Bella's body. Gray quietly deliberated. He possesses magic theories that do not exist yet. If he shares something so drastic, the course of history will completely veer off track. He watched young Bella clenching her fists in frustration and fear. Gray remembered his last moments facing the liquidator. That frustration, fear, and hopelessness are way too familiar. He was just cannon fodder trained to fall in one shot. A helpless spectator while the heroes who were supposed to save the world were sliced apart like fresh meat. Knowing the future waiting for him if he doesn't make some moves, why would he not want to change the course of history? That hellhole people call the future is much better off changed. By the time his tea was finished, he had agreed to try to teach Bella as best as he could. She will be using supercompressed in no time. After the meeting, the three headed to the arena as the sun began to set. Gray busted out the chalkboard and tried his best to articulate what he learned from the boot camp lectures. After squeezing every bit that he could remember, he asked the girls to keep this privileged information amongst themselves. Information leaks won't be a problem since the professor drafted a magic contract beforehand. Those who break the contract shall die. After giving them the rundown, Gray asked what they thought about the theory. Just learning about the concept of OD alone was enough to blow Professor Ariel's mind, but the knowledge of magic he revealed is even more absurd. Bella praised his explanation as brief yet well organized. She felt like she was listening to a lecture on magic from hundreds of years in the future. With Bella simply hearing and absorbing the info dump, the history of magic had advanced by 100 years in this room. She kept gushing about advancing magic by a century, but Gray himself learned all these basic concepts from the grown-up sorceress just 10 years from now. It's a testament to her genius. There was a lot of information that even Professor Ariel failed to judge and grasp properly, so she deferred to her little magic prodigy. According to Bella's rough estimation, there's a good chance that the theory is sound. None of the concepts contradict the current magic theory that the world is running on, but the quickest way to find out for sure is to test it out. That's why they occupied the arena in the first place. If the theory holds water, the spell Bella quickly whipped up on the go should work. Holding a staff in her 2 hands, she placed her trust in Gray's teachings and tapped into her full power. That doesn't sound like a good thing. If he remembers correctly, Bella Albright's strength is rumored to be capable of burning an entire city down in an instant. She's practically a weapon of mass destruction. Moreover, she was infamous for having no proper control over her powerful magic output. Today must be the day he witnesses that legendary display of dominance. Even Bella was shocked to see what she just kicked off. A gigantic blaze of scorching fire shot out and escaped from the middle of the arena and into the clouds. Gray tried to warn her against this reckless idea, but it was too late. The pillar of flame stood tall with the young mage at its foundation, holding up an imposing magic circle. This overwhelming power stood at the pinnacle of magic in his past life. If Bella hadn't taken control of the spell a split second earlier, he would have been swallowed by the blaze. That fine elemental manipulation literally saved his life. Oblivious of other people's fear, Bella was beaming with joy. She finally did it. She bridged the gap between her theoretical and practical talents. Pushing herself even harder, she proceeded to tame the flaming pillar, molding it into the shape of a roaring, fiery dragon. For the first time in her life, she found magic fun. She was swept by the moment and quickly gassed herself out. The fire petered out, and she felt the drawback of her test right away as her ether reserves dried up. Her legs gave up, and she lost consciousness. The staff dropped to the floor, and so did her body. Worried, Gray ran up to the unconscious girl while the professor told him to chill out. This collapse was a classic case of ether depletion. All Bella needs is a little bit of rest, and she'll be back to a 100% in no time. Hearing that assuaged Gray's worries. Still, even Ariel was astounded by the marvelous display of magical talent the young woman displayed. She might be the only person who can put together magic on that scale after learning a new concept. While completely out of it, the napping mage mumbled that it's not her who is amazing, but the theory. Gray gave her the tool to easily create her own super-compressed ether. Well, it was a tool she was supposed to develop in the future. Ariel sighed in relief. Bella no longer needs that shady surgery from that arcane criminal. She would gladly curse Bradley off herself. The professor was glad to see the young mage avoid a ruinous path. She's especially glad that she did not lose her magic control through some unsanctioned experiment. Although Bradley's special surgeries were proven to increase one's magical output, they come at the expense of control. Exactly how it works is a mystery, but it's highly likely that the lunatic found a way to forcibly break a person's limiter. Now it makes sense why the sorceress in the past world was rumored to be an out-of-control weapon of mass destruction. In any case, today's massive progress would not have been possible without Gray's help. The terms of their contract have been fulfilled. It's the professor's turn to fulfill her obligations listed on the magic paper. First of all, she promised to do something about his arm. There's a magic spell in her repertoire that might help. Extending her hand out, she summoned countless translucent butterflies made of pure ether. They flew all around the arena as she gently touched her student's hand. Upon contact, the around the area swirled and stirred, coalescing upon the point of connection. For a few seconds, Gray accepted the healing touch openly. Afterwards, he tried clenching his injured hand and felt a drastic difference in comfort compared to before. He can finally move his dominant hand again. It was a vast improvement. With his spirits up, he wholeheartedly thanked the professor for solving one of his biggest problems. Not even a magic healing potion could cure his mysterious injury, yet her light touch did the work. She boasted that her nerves-restoring magic shouldn't even be mentioned in the same breath as average magic healing potions. Before they got carried away, she wanted to make sure that he was really back to 100%. To test that, Gray must try swinging a sword to find out. For the first time in a long time, he touched the hilt of his blade with his dominant hand. He did a quick draw and slashed the sword casually. Right away, he noticed something alarming despite the supposed full recovery of his arm. To confirm, he lowered his stance and went through the motions of his swordplay to see how it felt. Much to his dismay, his right arm doesn't feel like it moves as fluidly as it used to. Professor Ariel expected something like this to happen. She may have repaired the nerves to their perfect state, but her magic can't heal the wounds in the young man's soul. Hearing her mention the soul confused Gray. While today's magic knowledge hasn't proven the existence of the human soul, Ariel is a firm believer that it does exist. After all, she can see it with this special eye of hers. Hiding underneath that sparkling monocle is an all-seeing eye that could see through everything. Right now, she can see Gray's soul slowly healing itself over time. She theorized that as long as he doesn't overexert himself, he will recover naturally. He innocently asked if practicing his swordplay would count as overexertion. The professor replied that it doesn't. He can train normally. Rather than that, she asked him what kind of swordsmanship he practiced that could harm one's soul so badly. Then again, swordplay that uses one's soul as fuel is not a new idea. In fact, she knows a certain someone who has the same capability. Amy White is another student of the Divine Eye Special Admission course. She reckoned that there must be some connection between these two students of hers. Gray was shaken and confused as to why Professor Ariel would think that way. He hasn't even encountered the future Sword Saint in this timeline. Ariel assumed that Gray knew Amy based on the way he wielded his sword. It gives the impression that he learned it from that sword nerd. On second thought, the professor did notice some slight differences. It felt like the person he learned swordplay from was a far more skilled version of little Amy. She estimates that in a few years, Amy will be just as skilled as whoever Gray's master was. Her deduction ability is way too scary. Her eye can see the fine details, and she can interpret them expertly. Gray asserted that he learned to wield a sword at his hometown dojo, which is technically not a lie. For now, he needs to change the topic or risk spilling his secrets. Back to the subject of damaged souls and swordsmanship, ordinary techniques cannot possibly connect these two intangible concepts. To begin with, she's well aware that Gray has some secret move that can defeat an ogre general, an ogre army, and everything around with one slash. She already did her homework. Thanks to Gray's absurd accomplishment, the bet she proposed with little Leon at the entrance ceremony was a free win. Ariel was shown some of the remains left at the scene and found them to be simply magnificent. Not even the most sophisticated cleaving magic could achieve that level of precision and lethality. That mysterious power within Gray, whatever it is, caused the injury in his soul. She can see it with her eyes. Ariel can peer through his soul and peek at the power leaking through a chained door. Hearing her say that made him a believer. The chained door is the imagery he kept coming back to inside his mind. This is not something one can figure out by guesswork. This woman is the real deal. That being said, Ariel had seen power similar to Gray's before. While it wasn't a one-to-one copy, they had a very similar vibe. Curious, he asked if there were other people with similarly mysterious powers to his. She knows of one that fits the description, but she's not 100% sure if they are human or not. Professor Ariel called it the Liquidator, the same Liquidator who ushered in the end of the world. Based on his reaction, she could tell that the kid had heard of them one way or another. Gray's mind was reeling. Why is the Liquidator being mentioned this early in the timeline? The sultry professor didn't expect that the young man would be familiar with such an esoteric being. But then again, he knows some futuristic kind of magic theory, so it's not that big of a surprise. Gray felt a little awkward being credited with the revolutionary theory when he simply reiterated what he learned from the real genius. Curious, Ariel pressed him about how much he knows about the so-called Liquidator. In all honesty, he doesn't know much, but he's certain that the Liquidator is an extremely dangerous threat to humanity. That creature has to be stopped before he can gather more power, something that needs to be destroyed no matter the cost. Ariel found his stance a little too extreme, but she agreed that the Liquidator poses some danger. Even so, Bradley seems intent on continuing his experiments on this subject. It sounds like the future cataclysm of apocalypse is somehow related to the infamous magic terrorist. As far as Ariel knows, the Liquidator is the very being Bailey and Bradley is trying to summon. This was news to Gray. No one ever told him the origin of mankind's enemy. Thinking about it, the Academy in the last timeline served as a center point of history. The higher-ups acted as if they knew exactly where the Liquidator would appear. There's a high possibility that the World Union Academy itself had a hand in summoning the Liquidator all along. The professor and the secretive freshman agreed that this extremely reckless experiment had to be stopped before it got out of hand. Unfortunately, the one running the studies is also a tenured professor. Ariel doesn't have the authority to shut him or his experiments down. She already tried to push the higher-ups to move, but they simply wouldn't listen. Unfortunately, she doesn't have the authority to divulge any more information to a mere student. The bottom line is unless orders come from above, no one can force Bailey and Bradley to stop his lunacy. Gray was hoping to at least get the names of the Academy's higher-ups, but that's out of the question for now. It looks like the Academy's leadership is more tangled than he thought. But if he can prove that Professor Bradley is a dangerous criminal, maybe they could have enough bullets to change things. In the previous timeline, Balian's illegal experiments claimed the lives of tens of thousands, and Gray knows where these atrocities will happen. There shouldn't be any harm in sharing this information with Professor Ariel. This way, they can catch the maniac red-handed, but she outrightly shut down the idea. Entering an Academy professor's research facility without permission is considered a heinous crime on its own. They might have to produce hard evidence in a different way without risking prison time themselves. But if Gray can deliver some hard proof right now, that might change things. If not, then they have no choice but to shelve this idea for the time being. It sounds like Ariel is aware of the possible dangers, but her hands are tied by bureaucracy and Academy politics. It's frustrating, but understandable. More importantly, she wants to delve deeper into the topic of Gray's mysterious power. She teased that there might be a way to learn how to control that lethal weapon. There's a professor in the Academy who specializes in dealing with unknown forces. Gray's case is the perfect puzzle to solve. Professor Heathcote Longfellow is his name. Gray had heard the name before. Heathcote Longfellow was the one who trained the Sword Saint herself. He's a legendary figure. Ariel knew that this idea would catch the young man's interest. She promised to arrange a private training session with the Stoic professor for tomorrow. Gray gratefully accepted Ariel's aid. The very reason he came to the Academy was to master this power after all. He didn't expect to find a solid lead so quickly. Things are finally looking up. The very next day, Gray found himself in close proximity to the stern professor. His first private lesson from Heathcote Longfellow is underway. Ariel certainly worked fast. Gray expected some hardcore training or extensive theoretical lessons, but Professor Longfellow dragged him to the woods, and now they're running in circles. They're still inside the Academy zone, but they're in the middle of a thick patch of forest. While he was trying to figure out the purpose of this aimless running, Professor Longfellow scolded him for letting his mind wander. Instead of thinking stray thoughts, he should be picking up his pace instead. They must run and push the body to its absolute limits. Longfellow believes that the power of the soul truly awakens once every drop of physical strength is burned away. Gray is prohibited from touching his sword until every little iota of his stamina has been spent. The young man can't see the bigger picture yet, but he completely trusts Heathcote's methods. Still, while he's out here running laps, Balian is carrying out inhuman experiments to summon the arbiter of the end. It's hard to get your mind off that nagging thought. Gray is carrying the burden of future sight, and it is slowing him down. Nevertheless, he's stuck with the training regimen for an entire week. On the 7th day, he was summoned to report back to Professor Ariel. Gray felt a little embarrassed that all he's been doing was endless running and just a bit of sword drills at the very end. Admittedly, he feels a slight improvement in strength. Ariel couldn't hold her amused laugh. She's well aware of Heathcote's bizarre methods. With the report concluded, a messenger politely entered the office. He handed a sealed letter addressed to Professor Ariel. She immediately opened the message, and her expression slowly twisted as she read through the correspondence. By the time she reached the end of the letter, she was frozen in her seat. Worried, Gray asked what was wrong. She wordlessly handed him the letter to see for himself. It would be better that way. It was a letter written by Bailey and Bradley. The lunatic had received the report regarding Bella Albright's super-compressed ether breakthrough. He insisted that although there's a close resemblance, the young mage has not actually achieved the level reported. He therefore refuses to recognize her new ability. Accordingly, the surgery contract remains valid, and the surgery shall proceed as scheduled. It was a preposterous letter written by a master rage baiter. It was insanity. Ariel is pissed. It seems Bailey and Bradley is determined to get his hands on a prime guinea pig in the form of Bella. He's trying to force her into a completely unnecessary and dangerous procedure. Unfortunately, the maniac has all the power. The magic contract Bella signed was airtight. Unless Bradley voids it himself, Bella is obligated to choose between expulsion and surrendering her body to a madman. Gray refused to accept that bullshit. Ariel concurred. This letter lit a fire under her ass to act with no regard for bureaucracy, and she needs Gray's help. She wants to know the location of Bradley's secret lab. It will be risky, but she must expose that bitch as a criminal to render the outrageous contract null and void. Finally, she's down to getting her hands dirty. This is precisely what Gray needs. Gloatingly, he asked why she had changed her mind when exposing a fellow professor without solid proof on hand, which poses a risk that is too high. Well, they are past working within the bounds of the law. She's putting her faith in Gray in order to protect another one of her precious students. From the very start, her eye had foreseen that this would happen, that Gray had been telling the truth this entire time. It took some time in a blatantly absurd letter to admit it, but Ariel is finally awake. It's time for Gray to lead the way, guided by knowledge of the future. Together, they will bring that psycho's crimes against humanity to light. The Dark Swordsman returns. As far as he knows, that vile laboratory is hidden in the mountains near the village of Toruel. Professor Ariel vaguely recalls news that one of the other faculty members had been given authorization to construct a lab there. This means those illegal and inhumane experiments have been sanctioned by the Academy. There is no better place to conduct illegal research than the mountains of Toruel. Practically, no one will bat an eyelid if he stays there for long. On top of that, professors of the Academy respect the unwritten rule forbidding interference with each other's projects. But as long as they can gather some evidence proving that crimes against humanity are being conducted, they shouldn't be charged with breaking and entering. While they were discussing the plan of attack, Bella knocked on the door and Ariel let her in. She had just received a letter that contained the ghastly news. Her emotions are in turmoil with an overwhelming sense of defeat. Professor Ariel grabbed the letter from her hand, assuring Bella that this mess would be taken care of one way or another. It sounds like Ariel is planning to fight Varian Bradley all by herself, and Bella won't stand for that. With a confident smile, she insisted that she could solo that bastard any day of the week. The worried young lady gave Gray a pleading look to intervene, so he stepped up and pledged to come with the professor. Stealing her resolve, Bella also volunteered to tag along. She doesn't want to rely on everyone else to solve her problem. Ariel thought she could just move by herself. She warned them that Varian is a seasoned professor. Not only that, he's also a lunatic who has no regard for human life. If he catches an inexperienced student trying to foil his plans, there's no telling what he might do. As the grown-up in this conversation, she can't possibly risk these kids. But Gray saw this as all the more reason why going alone is dangerous. He asserted that he could tap into the power he used to take down an ogre general if the need arises. He won't be deadweight. Besides, if something bad happens to Ariel, then the Divine Eye program would undoubtedly get dissolved, effectively expelling Gray and his peers. He would rather have a say on his future, a choice to decide their own fate. Seeing the determination in their eyes, Ariel could not possibly say no. They made it sound like they would still come even if she forbade them to. In that case, she would agree to make this a team mission under one condition. No matter what happens, they must prioritize their own safety first and foremost. Gray and Bella readily accepted the stipulation. After wrapping up some precautionary measures, the three ventured into the haunting mounds of Torwell Mountains. Tucked inside and hidden away, Varian Bradley's sprawling private laboratory lay before their eyes. It's hard to imagine what kind of horrors are going on inside those towering walls. Once again, the primary objective of this mission is to gather evidence of criminal activity. Nothing more, nothing less. With distinct rage in his eyes, Gray confirmed that they were in the right place. On the other hand, Bella felt apprehension. She's unsure if they could really pull this off without any trouble. Professor Ariel already did her homework. Varian Bradley should be at the Magic Society's conference right now. The lab should be Varian-free. Still, there's a good chance that the main gate is riddled with all sorts of traps. Just to be safe, they should bust through the sidewall and make their own entrance. Breaking into an Academy-authorized lab is already a crime anyway. There's no difference regardless of what method they use. One last time, Ariel gave Bella the chance to go back if she changed her mind. Gripping her staff tightly, she cast all her doubts aside. She asked if the professor was really willing to go through all this trouble for someone like her. Gray interjected and answered that this operation is not solely for her sake. Stopping Varian Bradley's devious plans is for the world's sake. If they don't do something now, countless people will die and the whole world will suffer. Professor Ariel found his reasoning a little exaggerated, but she agreed that the perverse animal must be stopped. So Bella should just chill and get out of her head. She's not the only one who needs saving. With all that preamble out of the way, Ariel led the way, dragging Bella along while Gray ran alongside them at full speed. Upon reaching the side wall of the towering lab, she calmly activated a fiery spell. Multiple explosive streaks of flames tore through the concrete without resistance. The resulting explosion lit up the whole mountain with a blistering light. You've got to give it to the professor. She knows how to put on an over-the-top show. Gray was the first one to peek through the instant entrance. What he saw inside made his skin crawl. Laid before his eyes was a long and dark hallway with countless jail cells lining both sides. Inside those cells were emaciated people, chained up and catatonic from extensive torture. Some of them looked dead. Some were missing limbs and bleeding out of their infected open wounds. They knew they would find something, but they didn't expect it to happen so soon. There's no need to even make an effort to look for incriminating evidence. The group traversed the long hallway. Every single iron-barred cell was filled with Varian Bradley's victims. So far, Ariel has noted traces of 14 forbidden spells used on the prisoners. That fact alone should convict Varian of serious criminal offenses. There isn't even a need to mention the extensive list of clear human rights violations committed in this place. Eventually, they came across a massive room in the middle of the lab. The floors were caked with old and fresh blood. At the center, an ominous magic circle can be seen. It looked like some sort of an altar. The initial plan was to get in, get some concrete evidence, then get out. But the kind young sorceress felt compelled to rescue the people trapped in this hellscape. Gray felt a worrying premonition. They shouldn't stay in this place for long. A rescue mission would take way too long, and Varian might return. Before they could even come up with their next move, a ghostly figure emerged from the darkness. He leisurely walked towards the group as though he was strolling through his private garden. Professor Ariel immediately recognized the man inching closer to them. It was the man, the myth, the unbearably ugly-ass mad scientist himself, Varian Bradley. Bro thinks he has aura. Gray immediately drew his sword, ready to respond to whatever evil UNC would do. Varian Bradley gloated that he arranged for a double to go to the conference in his stead. He's on the brink of a significant breakthrough in his experiment after all. This man bragged that he managed to get his hands on some extremely fresh materials for an important ceremony. You see, he likes to use his human lab rats while they're still fresh and breathing. But seeing Professor Ariel and her precious pupils on his doorstep, he decided to pivot and change the plan. Ariel worried for her students. Bella was paralyzed by a guttural terror, and Gray was ready to throw hands at any moment. Tonight's experiment would yield a far better result if the materials used possessed more potential for magic than the average person. Varian has no clue how they found out about his little hell on Earth, but he's sure that these three are operating covertly. That means they never told anyone where they're going. If they all suddenly go missing, not a single soul would know where to look. Whatever twisted thing Varian has in store for them would not lead to suspicion. Forget the crimes against humanity. Give this man the electric chair for that creepy-ass smile. From the sound of his villainous speech, it's obvious that Professor Varian is itching to turn them into lab rats that would push the boundaries of magic itself for a steep price. Since they had already seen all the dirty laundry, they could not be left alive. He might as well make use of their magic potential as best as possible. In the middle of his grandiose monologue, Varian found a massive fireball heading for his dome. The spell exploded with a fiery boom that lit up the desiccated room. Surprisingly enough, the attack didn't come from Professor Ariel. It came from the future great sage herself, Bella Albright. Looking at her determined expression, it seems like her initial fear is gone. Unfortunately, a sneak attack of this caliber won't do the job. Varian protected himself with a barrier in the nick of time. Even so, he praised the girl's potential and magnificent decisiveness. He attributed the discovery of such an exceptional talent to Ariel's divine eye. He had never really paid close attention to special admissions classes before. Perhaps he should start looking closer at the other recruits in that controversial batch. Nevertheless, a mere academy student trying to assassinate a professor would never work. The gap is too wide. Tossing away all her fears, Bella accepted that it would be better to get her hands bloody rather than be killed. She barely missed her chance, though. Worried for her students, Ariel issued the order to retreat. They already have their evidence, and the academy should be able to handle the rest. Professor Varia won't just let them walk away freely. Before they could take one step away, a burning black energy shot out of the deranged professor's scepter. In retaliation, his primary target was Bella. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. Ariel had to move quickly on her feet to take the brunt of the attack with her radiant barrier. With utmost focus, she strengthened the barrier while the dark energy persisted. Varian haughtily explained that defensive magic is pointless for this gluttony flame, which is one of the prized fruits of his extensive research. The spell conjures a flame so ravenous that it burns and devours defensive magic, turning it into fuel. In theory, it's a perfect spell that cannot be blocked. Its only downside was the required use of some rare biological material to cast. As Varian explained, Ariel's barrier was quickly torn apart and consumed, making the gluttony flame bigger and wilder. She tried to salvage the situation by getting her divine eye involved. Tapping into that mysterious power bought her enough time to put up another barrier. When the first layer finally gave in, the second layer took the brunt of the supercharged forbidden magic. As expected, Ariel's second barrier was also corroded and absorbed by the flame in a matter of seconds. Fearing the worst, she tossed a spell memory pouch to Bella and Gray. She reckoned that if Heathkit sees the pouch, that man will know what to do. Instead of taking the evidence and running, Bella put up a barrier of her own instead. Ariel started panicking. She already accepted that this might be the end of the line for her, but it doesn't have to be for her students. Even so, Bella wasn't into the idea of ditching her professor in the middle of battle when she still had some gas left in the tank. Ariel brought up the promise they made before this mission. They all agreed that if something goes wrong, survival must be prioritized. Varian's magic is clearly unnatural. All Ariel can do is buy time with her quickly degrading defensive spells. While arguing with her student, that defensive spell finally broke apart. She felt the rebound of her spell breaking, and Bella quickly picked up the slack. Her translucent barrier matched Gluttony Flame's power impressively. Bella analyzed Varian's attack and figured that it's not that strong by itself. It just needs a slightly different kind of defense magic to counteract. Seeing his flame stop in its tracks, Varian almost crashed out. The counter-magic theory for this spell is known to only a select few. So how could a mere student figure it out? Bella nonchalantly answered that someone special had recently taught her some new theory. With it, every spell had become way easier to decipher. From the brink of crashing out, Varian went full-on psycho. He thinks someone from his inner circle betrayed him and demanded to know the name of the traitor. Teasing him with the most innocent expression kept the identity of her mentor a secret. The man who opened up the world of magic to her is a mere student from the swordsmanship course. He patiently relayed some crazy ideas about magical theory. And with Bella's innate genius, piecing all the information together came naturally. Varian is a victim of a successful rage bait. Look at this man's veins, bro. They're about to pop. Have you been baited so hard that you pull out a suspicious bloody crystal to enhance your killing move further? Crushing the bloody crystal in his hand, the human souls trapped in that thing rushed out to fuel Gluttony Flame even more. At this point, the fire looked more like a sentient beast than an inanimate spell. Varian might be committing crimes against magic and humanity, but his spell looks cool as hell. Even so, Bella estimates that her barrier can hold for a bit longer. She can theoretically extend the standoff infinitely, but her mana reserves won't last for long. At her best, she can probably squeeze out one more minute. With her hands full on defense, Ariel would have to pick up the slack on offense. Using her divine eye, the red-headed professor locked in. Seeing the flow of magic clearly, she saw a spot where the flames were particularly thin. If she can project mana outside the barrier, Ariel might be able to break through. She conjured charged strings of mana to freely flow through Bella's ironclad barrier. From her position to Varian's, Ariel had a clear path to a kill shot. Unfortunately, her winding strings of mana were just too puny to muscle through Gluttony Flames. They slowly petered out until they were completely snuffed out. Varian laughed at the pathetic counterattack attempt. As far as Gray remembers, Professor Ariel's offensive magic is one of the weakest among the staff. Her specialty lies elsewhere. With the flame's properties, her inherently weak offensive power must have been devoured too. They have to figure out a way to wrap this up quickly. Bella is starting to feel gassed out. Her stance is faltering, and her grip is quivering. The barrier might go down any second now. This is precisely why Ariel tried to get her students to run to safety earlier. With all other options exhausted, it's time for the main event, Gray, to take on the burden. Bella didn't know how he could possibly do any damage when there was a storm of powerful magic between his sword and Varian. Gray basically said, "Nah, I'd win." Professor Ariel could read what he was planning and warned Gray against using his mysterious power again. Using it too soon could render his healing arm unrecoverable, or it could even kill him. Nevertheless, dying alone is better than all three of them dying, isn't it? Besides, they were worrying about nothing. The MC quickly broke through the gluttony flame, flashing a deadly red light on the other side for Varian to see. The last thing the crazy professor saw was Gray's unpredictably perfect slash mixed with splashes of his own blood. His brain was still trying to figure out what the fuck just happened while his head was neatly separated from his body. Just like that, Professor Varian Bradley was rightfully executed for his litany of crimes. His executioner is the man who's going to change the course of history. Gray Lee cut that villain's head smooth off. Unaware that her teammate was built like that, Bella Albright was stunned. Silence permeated the area until Varian's head and body hit the floor, dirtying the ground with his vile blood. This is Professor Ariel's first time seeing the real technique that originally piqued her curiosity, and it surpassed all her expectations. She knew it would be a powerful attack, but the extent of damage and lethality it produced was just staggering for a freshman. Suddenly, bits and pieces of the ceiling started raining down from above. Gray went a little overboard with the power output and damaged the structure of the spooky laboratory. While the building slowly collapsed, the batty professor stepped in to comfort her students. Without as much as lifting her fingers, she suspended the falling debris right before it hit the floor. She sighed in relief, praising Gray's monstrous attack. Glazing aside, Ariel asked for an immediate status check on Gray's body. Rapidly losing grip strength, he dropped his sword. His dominant hand shivered in dull agony. It has gone numb from withstanding the backlash. Nevertheless, the damage wasn't as severe as he expected. After a few moments, he picked his sword back up and felt fine moving. Ariel attributed this welcome change to the results of his hardcore training. If he were still the same village kid who lacked fundamentals, he would have undoubtedly fainted for days and woken up to noodle arms. Now it only leaves him with some pain. It's quite a massive improvement. Heathcote worked him to the bone, but the training is really showing its fruits. Ariel's divine eye was glued to her student. She's trying to make sure that they don't overlook any lingering damages. While she is grateful for how Gray performed in clutch time, she also feels sorry for being so powerless. She was supposed to protect her pupils but ended up relying on Gray at the end of the day. Gray assured her that no one is to blame. Besides, he was the one who insisted on this mission to stop Varian in the first place. Still, Professor Ariel emphatically lectured him about the consequences of using an unknown power. She advised restricting its usage for a while. By her estimation, abusing this overpowered technique without knowing the full extent of its effects can cause irreversible damage. Gray felt the weight of concern behind her advice and promised to observe caution. After snapping out of her stunned silence, Bella timidly asked Gray if what he just showed was some kind of unknown magic. She did not sense any ether at all. Being a mage, this oddity is breaking her reality. Actually, trying to explain how such a high power output is possible with magic is just impossible at this point in time. In order to save Gray from the hassle of explaining himself, Professor Ariel asserted that probing further into this matter is forbidden. She doesn't want Bella to mention a word about what she saw here either. She was just asking out of curiosity, but this is a gravely serious matter. Although it would be against her will, Professor Ariel wouldn't hesitate to erase Bella's memories if it meant protecting Gray's secret. Vadiel, realizing how serious she was, Bella proposed the formation of a magic contract for everyone's peace of mind. Ariel took care of the paperwork, magically summoning the arcane binding agreement. Bella signed the magic paper without hesitation. With Varian Bradley out of the picture, the trio is free to plan their next move. Though Gray wanted to investigate the various inhumane experiments as soon as possible, he believed that helping the human lab rats should come first. From the looks of it, every single one of them had been knocked out by sleep magic. They should not be in any immediate danger, but taking them to the Academy's medical facilities is the smart move just to be safe. For what Ariel lacks in combat power, she makes up for it with her array of utility spells. The inhumane prison lit up with a golden hue as each prisoner was encased in a protective capsule. This protective membrane should keep them safe from most external harm for now. With the prisoners safe and shielded, the trio should be able to investigate further inside. Now that they could roam more freely, Ariel was once again surprised by the scale of this criminal operation. Traces and evidence of illegal experimentations are out in the open as far as the eye can see. Almost all of them involve the use of human sacrifice to produce magical catalysts. There were also cruel setups exploring the possibility of enhancing a human's magical abilities and capacity. Despite all these grotesque trials, Ariel did not see any signs relating to the liquidator. Gray is operating on the future site that this is the location where tens of thousands of people died relating to Liquidator's emergence. He knows that this lab has to be more than a mere magic catalyst factory. He was suddenly reminded of a crucial detail. He read incident reports detailing how the majority of casualties resulted from a miasma that welled from the ground. If that's the case, something more sinister must be hiding underneath this place. Curious and unsettled, Gray suggested that they explore more vertically to find some possible hidden passages. With a cursory glance, Professor Ariel's divine eye did not pick up any signs of that sort. But upon closer look, she picked up on something out of place near Varian's blood-soaked corpse. Squatting on top of the oddity, Ariel pushed more ether into her divine eye, peering through all the illusions. It was infinitesimally faint, but she could sense traces of short-distance teleportation magic on the floor. Perhaps they are on the brink of discovering a space only accessible to high-level magic. Based on the faint traces, she estimated the teleportation distance to be around 300 meters going down. Thankfully, she's well-versed in the art of short-distance teleportation herself. With a snap of a finger, they should be able to override the concealment. Suddenly, a massive gate made of pure magic and surfaced from the ground. If they hit nothing, the other side of this gate should lead to nothing but earth and dirt. Ariel is banking on the off chance that they find something, anything. The trio fearlessly stepped through the gate. None of them could have expected what was waiting on the other side. 300 meters below the illegal prison lab was a city made of tightly packed structures. Who would have thought there'd be a massive area under such an inconspicuous place? Being particularly sensitive to magic, Bella pointed at one particular building. She could feel a tremendous ether output coming out of it. Situated in the middle of the bizarre white city, a modest-sized dome clear from nearby obstructions stood tall. Focusing her divine eye on the dome, Professor Ariel picked up a sign of not just ether, but also a completely different kind of power leaking out. It's far greater than anything she had ever seen. Gray had a feeling that they had finally found what they were looking for. Dripping out of the dome were residues of the liquidator's power. Bracing themselves, the trio walked up the stairs leading to the dome. When they entered the structure, they found a door adorned with an ominous insignia and a platform surrounded by vials filled with purple goop. The foreign power was definitely emanating from the door encircled by the vials. Professor Ariel investigated the door's surface area and extended her senses. Unfortunately, there are no signs of the liquidator's presence. Meanwhile, Bella was a nervous wreck, unsure whether they should even be messing with this cultish display. Ariel assured her that the door itself is safe. It doesn't hold any power. If anything, it's just a benign symbol for the ritual. The thing they should be careful about is the magic rigs placed at the tip of the 8-pointed star. Confidently tapping into that forbidden power, Professor Ariel spurred the formation's activation. Gray panicked for a moment. One wrong move and they might accidentally summon the liquidator or something. Bella voted to just shut this thing down before they messed up and put themselves in danger. Ariel was unbothered. She just implored her students to stay put. Her prediction tells her that this setup won't actually summon a world-ending threat. Once the power from the rig filled the door, it started showing spatial cracks all over its surface. Gray and Bella wanted to pull their professor out of the formation, but ultimately chose to trust her judgment. The magic rigs glowed even brighter, making the spatial cracks bigger. A few moments later, the mechanism attached to the rig slowed down the ether infusion. Just as Ariel expected, the formation wasn't meant to summon the liquidator. It was built to punch a tiny gap towards a different place of existence. Once the hole is big enough, it funnels the leaking power, turning it into pure crystal. At the core of crystallization is a seed most likely made of countless human sacrifices. According to her estimation, the pre-existing essence in the room is made up of about 10 souls. The molding process might have taken more sacrifices than that exponentially. The majority of the drugged-up prisoners they saw upstairs must have been slated to be raw materials for this twisted process. Curious and disturbed, Bella asked why Varian and his cohort would go so far just to gather an alternative power source. What were they planning to do with it? Well, they already saw the power augmented by human souls. That black flame Varian used in the fight was most likely a product of this setup. The crystal Varian held in his hand is basically a finished product. That catalyst can be used outside of just offensive spells. If they managed to mass-produce these appalling crystals, they could practically power anything needed for their nefarious plans. After getting a glimpse of the formation's true purpose, the cracks on the door slowly disappeared. At this point in time, Varian likely wasn't trying to call the liquidator. Whether he didn't try or just couldn't is still unknown. Punching a tiny hole to a different dimension already pushed the space-opening magic rigs to their limit. Maybe Varian and his fellow sickos haven't managed to unlock their full potential yet. Nevertheless, the apparatus must be insanely valuable. A high-output spatial warp magic with such precision is bound to be worth an ungodly amount of wealth. Ariel estimated that making just one of the 8 magic rigs would cost an entire nation's budget. Only one organization in the world has that kind of clout and cash. Bella immediately thought of the Discard Empire, but Professor Ariel was thinking of a different group. The Discard Empire might be the world's biggest country, but it probably doesn't have the magical research resources to build these rigs. There is only one organization whose magical research dwarfs even the empires, the one and only World Union Academy. That's right, the same glorious institute they all belong to. Professor Ariel has been around the block for a number of years. She knows for sure that no other research body can support a project of this scale and budget. The World Union Academy, which was supposed to defend the world from threats, is dabbling in some freaky territory. Ariel was 100% certain that all the puzzle pieces pointed to their supposedly stellar academy. Still, that doesn't mean the whole academy is privy to this villainy. Most of the institute must have been just as clueless as they were before stumbling into this dome. Before the timeline reset, Gray saw how the academy's top forces fought with their lives on the line on the front lines. Even beyond the heroic subjugation squads, most students and professors kept protecting civilians right until the very end. After seeing that future with his own eyes, Gray refuses to believe that the academy is pure evil. Ariel agreed with his assessment. She reckoned that most of the academy acts for the sake of humanity and would condemn Varian's illegal activities. However, the academy is massive. It houses countless talented researchers from all over the world. They have access to the best facilities and resources. Hardly anyone in the world can truly grasp the whole picture. Whoever was involved with Varian must have some serious backing and influence. The illegal lab and the magic rigs could not have been arranged with just a professor's authority. With that being said, they cannot fully trust the academy. Ariel has been watching the intricacies of the prestigious institute from the inside for decades. She had learned long ago that it's not an organization to be trusted blindly. Most of the people inside must actually think they are doing what's best for the masses. Hell, even the ones behind this deplorable crime against humanity probably deluded themselves into thinking that they are acting for the greater good. The truth is buried in the dark, and they have barely scratched the surface. Unfortunately, finding the mastermind would be practically impossible at the moment. Ariel swept the area and found no communication devices inside the dome. Not even the Maker's magic residue is left in the rigs. They were in pristine condition. The cover-up is as thorough as it can be. Suddenly, the whole formation self-destructed. A series of deliberately placed explosives went off in unison, destroying the dome from the inside. Ariel remained unbothered as she calmly assessed the evidence-erasing mechanisms. Since the whole place didn't blow up the moment Varian died, this sequence must have been designed to lure the ones snooping around to take them out in one fell swoop. Bella urged the professor to stop hypothesizing and to get them out of this place instead. Once again, Ariel demonstrated that someone of her caliber wouldn't fall for such cheap tricks. She might be a bit useless in a straightforward combat, but she's peerless when it comes to survival. As bits and pieces of the dome ceiling fell, Ariel conjured a golden magic circle. She strongly advised her pupils to stay inside her spell encompassing the magic rigs. With perfect precision, she covered everything and everyone that needed protection. When the targets were locked, she pulled the trigger and teleported them out of harm's way. The professor, Gray, Bella, the magic rigs, and the unconscious prisoners reappeared right outside Varian's sinister laboratory. Although some of them suffered permanent damage, every surviving human lab rat made it out alive. Bella could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Even Gray was on edge. That last bit was way too close for comfort. Given that she had to move more baggage than expected, Ariel's teleportation spell was slowed down, but it was all worth it for the magic rigs alone. Once these valuable contrabands get involved, the Academy won't be able to ignore them anymore. The very next day, Ariel brought up all the necessary information to her boss. World Union Academy's headmaster, Oradrum Alexandro, extended his gratitude for the trio's affirmative action. The survivors are currently being treated in the Academy's medical wing, and Varian's illegal experiments have been verified and dealt with. As for the magic rigs, that matter is a little more complicated. After a thorough verification process, each one was evaluated equal to a nation's annual budget. 8 of those things would cost an ungodly amount to produce. There's no way Varian alone could gather that kind of firepower. The headmaster straight up confessed that the rigs were stolen goods. These treasured magic artifacts were hijacked mid-transport. At the time of the incident, 78 transport agents were brutally wiped out. That number of casualties is no joke, but it was kept under wraps for some unknown reason. Come to think of it, Ariel vaguely recalled an incident that matches the description from 15 years ago. The stolen cargo back then carried these valuable engines. Investigations indicated that the culprit behind the massacre and theft was the blood drinker. Headmaster Oradrum Alexandro presumed that everyone was familiar with the name. It's the world's biggest crime organization after all. They are parasites that cannot be killed. They always reform no matter how many times they are crushed. Bella made it her business to learn everything about the syndicate because they were the ones who murdered her parents. Blood drinkers' ability to resurface no matter how many times they're exterminated makes them a persistent scourge. No one knows where they hide or who's on the lead. Some say over 70% of all crime-related deaths can be traced back to them one way or another. It would not be unreasonable to assume that some of their assets have already infiltrated the Academy, and there's no way to identify them. Even if there was a way, the Academy would not act on it. Hearing this absurdity straight from the headmaster's mouth infuriated Gray. Ariel resigned that the Academy is built on a creed that allows situations like this. Anyone with talent is welcomed with open arms no matter their race, bloodline, gender, or affiliation. As long as they could blossom into someone truly outstanding, their criminal inclinations don't matter. Bella protested that criminals should be dealt with, not nurtured. Headmaster Alexandro could not agree more. Unfortunately, the higher-ups don't share that view. He might be headmaster in name, but he's resigned to the fact that he's nothing more than an underling in the grand scheme of things. Sure, he is the face of the Academy on paper, but the authority he actually holds is borderline laughable. If Gray and Bella really want to know who's truly running things in this place, then they'd better grind and grow stronger quickly. The more power and potential they prove they have, the deeper they'll be allowed into the Academy's exclusive circles, and the more secrets will be uncovered. Alexandro cannot drop names, but he hinted that one upperclassman student has enough influence to shape the Academy's entire direction. That kid even had a hand in the crazy policy of accepting talented criminals. To keep things simple, if Gray can get stronger than that wildly influential upperclassman, he could change how things are run in the Academy itself. In this place, strength is everything. With a clear goal in mind, both of the Divine Eye students felt the fire of motivation in their hearts. Holding his tongue, the headmaster had one lingering question in his mind. He knows that when it comes to combat, Ariel could not possibly stand a chance against Varian at all. That means one of these two youngsters overcame the gigantic chasm of power between student and professor. Ariel's Divine Eye is sharper than ever this year. Alexandro is eager to see what kind of monster the special program will produce. After the meeting with the headmaster, Gray headed out to a long hallway deep in thought. Looking at the arm that houses his unknown power, he pondered the importance of power. If he wants to uncover the mysteries surrounding the Academy to ultimately change history, getting stronger is imperative. He needs to shift his focus to getting stronger in any way possible. While he was contemplating how the future would look, someone rudely bumped into him. Forced out of his reflective mood, he looked up and saw the bottom of a shoe rapidly closing in on his face. With insufficient time to react and dodge, he instinctively raised his arms to defend. Gray was sent flying back a few feet away. It was quite an impactful kick. He felt a sharp pain in his arm after tanking an unexpected attack. The assailant clicked his tongue and admitted that Gray was tougher than expected. When confronted, the assailant was oddly offended. He had dark circles under his dead eyes and an emo haircut. He complained that Gray walks around like he owns the place when he's just a mere special admission reject. It sounds like emo here is just another one of those entitled pricks who hate the special slots. This is the first time someone actually acted against him though. Gray grabbed onto his blade, ready to throw down if needed. Emo wanted to go all the way too, but the so-called reject number 2 just showed up. He was talking about Professor Ariel. The cowardly Emo turned around and walked away before the professor could meddle. Once he was far enough away, Emo started muttering to himself and apologizing for not getting any closer to the target. He bit into his thumb in frustration, nibbling until he bled profusely. Emo quietly swore that he would send that reject to the afterlife to accompany Professor Varian when the time was right. When Professor Ariel caught up, she asked what had just happened. Gray snitched that some random punk just kicked him out of nowhere for simply walking around the academy's halls. Since no weapons were involved and no injuries were incurred, she can't really do much, officially speaking. Even so, she gave Gray the green light to chase the bitch and punch the lights out of the prick. Technically, she can't be giving out permissions like that, but she could just turn a blind eye and use some haphazard excuse about a decline in her eyesight. Gray doesn't want to cause any unnecessary trouble, so he chose to let the matter go. The trouble-making professor was a little disappointed. Since they're on the topic of discrimination, she asked Gray what it's like being under her Divine Eye special program. Gray admitted that jeers and rude comments are commonplace, but this is the first time someone actually got physical with him. Hearing what her students go through, Ariel profusely apologized for her shortcomings and lack of authority. Gray reminded her that he would not even be admitted to this place if it weren't for her intervention. Besides, he's confident that Bella and the other will soon prove that the program wasn't a mistake. After all, he's seen how good her eye is for spotting talent. All her hand-picked students went on to become renowned heroes on their own merits. Gray's words gave her some comfort. Ariel was pleased to hear that he believed in her ability. Nevertheless, she implored him to nut up. Out of everyone in the Divine group, she admitted that she's expecting the most out of Gray. Amy White, Leek Muller, and Jacob Bloomfield, as the special admits before them, have the potential to become top tier. But Gray made her believe that someone could surpass humanity. Being compared to future heroes made him uncomfortable, but Ariel's utmost confidence in his talent is quite reassuring. The mastermind behind Varian's crimes is still out there, plotting to summon the Liquidator. Those heroes that he admired so much couldn't hold a candle to that otherworldly being. The sole reason he came back to the past is to find a way to change history. The fate of this world rests in his hands. After tangling with criminal organizations and war crimes, it's time to go back to regularly scheduled classes. Gray is still a student, you know? Today's swordsmanship class will be live combat practice. The professor already paired up students according to the list on the board. Practical training is tough. Gray readied himself mentally. If he screws up, everyone will have a reason to talk trash about Divine Eye again. He won't let that happen. At the very least, he needs to keep up with the average student. Unfortunately, his matchup might make that difficult. He was paired with the freshman representative, Leonard Apius. Knockoff Lloyd Forger is the current top student of the swordsmanship course. The professor insisted that the pairings are decided by matching up students with similar skill levels, so there's no need to hold back. Everyone must treat this practical like a real fight. Gray quietly cursed the professor for making his life hellish today. As far as he knows, Leon despises Divine Eye students. That dude is probably itching to give him a bloody beating after their last encounter in magic class. Speaking of the devil, Leon grabbed him by the shoulder, stunning Gray. Unbeknownst to him, Blondie here is absolutely stoked to spar with his new idol. He's trained harder than his peers, and he is desperate to show Lord Gray his sword. Seeing the brightly intoxicated smile on his face, Gray didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or be scared. He interpreted this look as the look of a man loving the fact that he could beat up a classmate legally. After everyone found their partner, the professor gave the go signal to start. Right away, sounds of steel clashing filled the Colosseum. Leon Hart didn't waste a second and charged forward, speeding like a bullet. Gray raised his blade hurriedly, barely blocking the energetic strike. Leon easily overpowered his block, sending him skidding by force. Blondie relentlessly closed the gap, not letting him get an inch of break. Gray tried to retaliate, but he was easily thwarted by Leon's perfect form. Based on their brief metallic exchange, Leon genuinely praised Gray's strength. It's a wonder how he didn't make it in through regular admission. Now that they've got an initial gauge of each other, both combatants stepped on the gas and increased the speed. Gray thought he would get wrecked instantly, but he was actually holding his own. He was absolutely mocked when it comes to raw power. As for technique, Leon's polite swordsmanship is the perfect definition of by-the-book style perfected to a terrifying degree. Even with his extensive combat experience from his past life and his master's hardcore training, he was barely keeping up. Leonard Apius is one of those homegrown monsters with a combination of talent and diligence. When their sparring reached its climax, virtually everyone in the field stopped their duels to watch the two. They were all surprised that the Divine Eye student was actually keeping up with their number one. Leon was having the time of his life. He could do this all day if given permission. On the other hand, Gray was struggling with his quickly fading stamina. If it wasn't for Professor Heathcote's hardcore training, he would have gassed out a few clashes ago. On the contrary, Leon looked like he was wholly unaffected. The guy wasn't even breathing hard yet. If this turns into a battle of attrition, Gray would be forced to take the L. Luckily, the professor gave them explicit instructions to treat this practical like it's a real fight. That means they would not be limited to textbook techniques. When Leon tried to hack him in half, Gray ducked out of the way in an unusual stance. He was almost face down, ass up in there. Using his palm, he pivoted his body from the floor. Not expecting such unorthodox movements, Leon was caught off guard. Instead of fighting a losing battle using swords, he resorted to using his feet to limit Blondie's mobility. Gray literally swept that fraud off his feet. While Blondie was suspended in the air, Gray used his sword to capitalize. Looking into his eyes, Leon finally understood what the professor meant when he said to treat this bout like a real life or death battle. Even at such a disadvantageous position, he refused to lose. Ultimately, the blades of both fighters ended up inches away from each other's throats. Gray was in an upright position, while Leon eked out a quick counter from the ground. Gray offered a helping hand and called the duel a draw. Leon gladly accepted the olive branch, but refused the draw decision. He knew that at the last second, all he could do was swing his sword by instinct. On the other hand, Gray could have clearly pierced his tip into Leon's heart if he had wished so. Since this was still a mock battle, Gray had to force himself to shift his target. Even with all the protective spells in place, he did not feel comfortable pointing a sword at a sparring partner's heart. With a smile, Leon Hart graciously accepted the loss. Thanks to this exchange, he gleaned valuable insights on the difference between real combat and mere fencing practice. Gray felt a bit ashamed for pulling a trick move in a swordsmanship class, but Leon asserted that anything goes in real combat. There's no such thing as cheating when lives are on the line. With that being said, he politely requested another round. Gray was rightfully hesitant to accept such a proposal. He only won the first bout because of his pivot surprise factor. Now that Leon knows how crafty he can be, his chances of stumbling into a win have gotten way slimmer. Even without mentioning the gap in technique, their stamina difference is just too wide. Before Gray could politely decline the enthusiastic proposal, some random NPC inserted himself into the discussion. NPC over here asserted that a sword class is meant for a showdown in technique, not trickery. In truth, he was just salty that the special admit loser was paired up with this year's top student. Gray was already getting annoyed by this dumbass yapping. Thankfully, Leon stepped in to defend Gray's qualification to fight as his only equal and told the NPC to fuck off. The professor piled on and reiterated that the pairings were decided by pairing students with similar overall strength. It just so happens that Gray is the only one who can take Leon on. If anyone wants to express dissatisfaction, challenges are welcomed. If the NPC boy can beat Gray, the professor would allow a showdown with Leon. NPC boy looked like he was about to pop a vein. He bragged that he was one of the few who beat the examiner to get into this prestigious institute. He refused to be lumped in with frauds who barely scraped by or the ones who outrightly failed. Leon scoffed at the NPC's simplistic line of thinking. It felt like he was listening and looking at the old Leon Hart. He reckoned that this would be a good chance for Gray to showcase his power that deserves all recognition. Still, he was absolutely pissed that some unnamed NPC interrupted his limited time with Lord Gray. NPC glanced behind his opponent and saw Leon gnawing his teeth in rage. For the crime of stealing time, he could have spent touching tips with Gray. It took every cell in Leon's body to stop him from committing murder. Poor NPC boy doesn't know that he's only alive because he's inside the campus. Since the entitled NPC was so salty about the use of unorthodox fighting styles, Gray agreed to solely use his swordsmanship skills. He has no clue how strong the challenger is, but anyone who got into the academy through stellar entrance exam results should be quite competent. Judging based on build alone, he could tell that the dude has better stamina and strength than him. His master's crude and brutal training could not possibly beat years of practice, nourishment, and conditioning. Right? First of all, Gray made sure that there were no hidden caveats for this challenge. It's just a for-fun match with no consequences. The professor nonchalantly assured him that this showdown doesn't even count, but encouraged the fighters to go all out. With the air cleared and the rules set, Gray and the NPC boy raised their blades. When the signal to begin was dropped, the NPC boy charged forward like a maniac. He's already convinced that this is the day he will rise in prominence by putting the special admit in his rightful place. To gauge NPC's strength, Gray openly received the initial strike with a well-timed block. Much to his surprise, the dude who loved talking shit actually has noodles for arms. While NPC boy was reeling in confusion, Gray was already plotting out the next move to deal with the light-hitting normie in front of him. Trying to recover from the humiliation, the NPC boy got up, acted as if nothing had happened, and restarted his attacks. Gray wondered if the dude was holding back or if he was just that bad. His mind was preoccupied by questions that he forgot to control the depth of the next cut he dished out. Gray easily drew blood by scarring the NPC's life forever. With one of the combatants desperately crawling on the floor, the professor motioned to announce the conclusion of today's final match. Gray immediately felt bad about overestimating his opponent and causing some serious damage. He was aiming for a simple disarm into a dodge, but the NPC guy was dumber than Gray anticipated. Like a good boy, NPC just stood there and took that tip until he bled. With tears of humiliation flowing down his face, NPC requested a rematch right away. He strongly insisted that he just slipped up and the first win was a mere fluke. The professor felt so bad for the guy that he allowed more rounds until he finally got the message. Once again, NPC boy lifted his blade and feet off the ground. A few minutes later, Gray hesitated to raise his sword out of pity for his poor victim. The NPC boy had been spanked and dog-walked repeatedly so that he looked unrecognizable from the arrogant challenger earlier. With a face that only a mother could love, the professor and the students averted their gazes. The swordsmanship professor had to ask some of his students to drag the dumbass into the infirmary. With the last bit of drama out of the way, the freshman year representatives were crowned. As expected, it was Gray and Leon. The repeated beatdown from earlier prevented any and all objections. Unfamiliar with how the academy works, he asked how he was selected as some kind of representative. Leon gladly explained that the top first years must take on the second-year champion in the much-awaited inter-year battle. In recent history, the first years have a record of 0 and 35. It was a literal 0% win rate, a 35-year losing streak. The professor has a feeling that this year would be different, though. 3.5 decades of absolute pub stomping is just too crazy. It signifies the power gap between freshman and second years. A single year of survival in this academy is huge. At this point, losing to the upperclassmen had become a normality. If anything, it's to be expected. If a freshman could put up a decent fight, that could already be considered an impressive feat. A win, on the other hand, would go down in the academy's history as a miracle. Being chosen as one of the two representatives should be taken as an honor. Leon and Gray must carry that responsibility on their shoulders. Since there are practically no expectations of winning, the inter-year battle doesn't sound as serious as Gray thought it would be. Still, this is a golden opportunity to prove that a Divine Eye Special student can actually hang with the big dogs. In the coming days, he immersed himself in intense training. Meanwhile, under the headmaster's lead, the academy's faculty meeting broached the topic of Professor Boudra's proposal. Looking like the pot of greed, Magic Department Professor Boudre floated the idea of kicking out the Divine Eye Special student Amy White. Immediately, Ariel opposed the incredulous proposal. She was the one in charge of her students. Random pigs should not have a say. Still, Boudre yapped about how Amy White failed the third-year advancement exam. He found it unfair that she got to stay in spite of her failure. Every other student who failed was expelled. It's not fair for those who went through the proper due process. Ariel calmly reiterated what she had already explained countless times before. Amy is progressing towards becoming a world-class fighter. She suffered intense backlash and is temporarily unable to display her full power. If healthy, she would have passed that silly exam with flying colors. Boudre refused to believe in Ariel's narrative. A few other professors also refuted her statement. Anyone could paint the picture of some hidden prodigy, but without solid evidence backing up the claim, it's all just fantasy. Ariel firmly asserted that Amy is bound to gain full control of her power any day now, maybe even tomorrow. If they push her too soon, that window might close forever. The coalition of magic department professors continued pressing her. They are framing their stance as if they want to protect the Academy's integrity by upholding its high standards. Ariel had to remind these people that the Academy exists to nurture exceptional talents. Kicking out someone gifted just because they don't fit into a system defeats that noble purpose. With a smug smile, Boudre insisted that the special picks are in a steady decline, labeling the current batch as a bunch of failures. Amy White, Bella Albright, and Jacob Bloomfield, all of these so-called prodigies come with some form of baggage. He implied that the divine eye must be going blurry. Perhaps it's time to abolish such an antiquated program. Ariel had gotten used to being piled on by these men, but they had never gone this far before. Boudre continued that the Academy's Founders Council established the program. So if they vote and half the faculty agrees to the idea, the decision should be respected. Given the lack of results from the current Divine Eye batch, a lot of professors are on board with this idea. They all heard about Bella's improvement, but they view it as a minor advancement given her still questionable mana capacity. Admittedly, old Divine Eye students were legendary talents. The recent batch pales in comparison. Based on the sly looks being traded around the round table, it seems like this meeting was a coordinated effort to oust Professor Ariel. There are more vocal anti-Divine Eye voices than she anticipated. At this rate, they might gain enough votes to gut her program. With the ugly-ass Boudre at the helm, they believe that they are championing a change in an outdated system. In truth, they just can't stomach the idea that a woman is a better judge of talent than they are. Ariel wanted so badly to defend herself and advocate for her students, but anything she says now could be twisted against her case. A loud majority already dislikes her heavily. Still, many professors care about whether a program benefits the Academy or not. If she wants to fold them into her side, she needs to be as inoffensive as possible. Boudre basked in the glory of making Ariel go mute and continued to lean into her with insults. They acknowledged her past achievements and suggested that she retire before she ruins her legacy any further in the same breath. Some of the hostile professors even suggested that she should just start her own school if she can't bear to let go of her precious students. Hearing such a blatantly disrespectful dig made Boudre and his buddies' belly laugh. Ariel endured the humiliation for the sake of buying her pupils more time. She truly believes that all they need is time and support before they can blossom into something truly special. If she could stop them from getting expelled before that happens, that would be a huge win. While they were on the topic of Divine Eye students, one of the geezers brought up Gray's name. It has been announced that the kid is being hailed as a promising freshman in the swordsmanship class. Hearing that a Divine Eye reject was picked for the inter-year battle made Boudre perk up. He confidently propositioned everyone to decide on the Divine Eye program's future based on the results of this year's inter-year battle. Ariel sneakily glanced at Heathkit. The stalwart trainer shook his head in disapproval. She argued that Gray is not suited for mock battles. He's supposed to be a lethal weapon only to be deployed in a kill or be killed scenario. A geezer slammed his fist into the round table and accused Ariel of coming up with more excuses. He believes that skills that won't show in training won't be useful in real combat either. Losing the leverage in this negotiation, she tried to explain that Gray's abilities cannot be judged through common sense. Before the meeting got even more heated, Headmaster Alexandro demanded silence before wrapping up today's discussion. Curious as to what Gray is capable of, the headmaster agreed that every professor should come and watch the inter-year battle before properly picking a side. Ariel was mortified, but the meeting had been adjourned. Every other professor left the round table with glee, leaving Ariel listless in her seat. Heathkit was worried for his friend. Ariel trembled as she silently apologized to her students. She's seen how strong Gray can be if unleashed at full power, but the boy still needs time to develop a solid foundation. Right now, all she could do is place her hopes and dreams on the back of her youngest prodigy. It's up to Gray to protect the Divine Eye program's future. The day of the inter-year battle has arrived, and the entire academy gathered at the Colosseum for the festive tradition. Introducing the competitors, the poster boy of Noble Swordsman, the freshman top student, Leonard Apius, earned loud cheers from the crowd. On the other corner was Lionel Hartman, the Academy's top-performing second-year student. When Gray Lee was introduced as the first-year challenger, the reception was a lot different compared to the Golden Boys. As for the second-year challenger, Gray recognized the kid as the edgy, emo teen who tried to jump him in the hallways not too long ago, Diebold Radardel. Who would have thought that he'd get the opportunity to get his lick back on the big stage? The host went through more formalities and platitudes while a thick air of tension wafted from one side of the viewing deck. Various professors from different departments have gathered to witness this year's inter-year battle. Leading the pack was Professor Boudre with his smug smirk and extra strong shirt buttons. Leon noted the inordinate number of professors who came to observe the showdown. Senior Lionel also found it strange. Last year, only 3 fencing professors bothered to show up. Looking around the entire row filled with esteemed professors, Leon finally understood what was happening. He reckoned that everyone must have carved out time out of their busy schedules out of curiosity about Gray. Lionel found Leon's enthusiasm odd. The guy never behaved like this when they were younger. Boudre confessed that they really showed out to watch Gray and to witness the final battle of the Divine I Special admits. That revelation caused a buzz amongst the students who just wanted to watch some bloody fights. Unaware of what was discussed behind closed doors, Gray asked for clarification. Boudre was amused to hear that the boy hadn't been informed of the crucial role he was about to play in academy politics. With full confidence, he announced that the Divine I class is being abolished, crushed, and deleted out of existence. Gray immediately turned to Professor Ariel for confirmation, but her reaction was enough of an answer. She knew that if she told Gray the truth, that boy would push himself to dangerous lengths. He might even risk it and use that destructive power again. Without proper rest and training, overstraining his body could kill him. Instead of moping, Ariel chose to put on a brave front and cheered on her boy. She alleged that Boudre was just playing mind games to psych him out. Her words might sound composed and confident, but her trembling hand paints a different picture. Gray chose to respect his professor's wish to protect him from pressure, but that doesn't mean he won't go sicko mode today. Boudre pouted when his provocations were dismissed, but he's excited to watch some clownery from the freshman. He's expecting the young man to lose so miserably that the other professors would finally get off the fence and realize that Ariel's Divine I is nothing more than a party trick these days. Since that pig upstairs can't stop yapping, Gray spoke up. He can't let blatant insults against his mentor slide. He doesn't care if Boudre badmouths him. Talking down on Professor Ariel's judgment is a mortal sin that he can't forgive. Hearing Gray stand up for her gave Ariel a kick in the guts. Boudre scoffed and tossed some generic trash talk. He can't even think of any creative insults. Gray vowed that by the end of the day, he would prove Boudre's dumbass wrong. Fatty loved dishing out insults, but he couldn't take them himself. The referee stepped onto the stage and asked the participants to split up into their respective corners. Ariel appreciated Gray's maturity, but she's in the dark as to what he's planning. If he were to fight the top student, Lionel, his practical swordsmanship style might have given him an edge no matter how slim. It just happens that he's matched with a terrible opponent. Diebold Radardel is an oddball. It is rumored that Professor Varian Bradley surgically rewired this kid's brain, boosting his reflexes to inhuman levels, turning him into a living weapon. This is the worst possible matchup for Gray's tricky ambush tactics. He might stand a chance if he chooses to deploy that double-edged technique, but Ariel's conscience won't be able to take it if anything bad happens to the kid. Before the event started, she assured him that there was no need to worry about her and the program. Gray responded with a confidently affirmative smile. First up is the top student match. Both representatives were called to step forward. The arena has been warded with protective magic to prevent fatal wounds. Triggering an opponent's safeguard will count as a dub, so both participants could move as if they were in real combat. The inter-year battle's top student match is officially underway. Trying to control the tempo from the start, Leon rushed headfirst with a roar. Lionel was pleased to see the aggression. He wanted to test the waters first. As soon as he entered a comfortable range, Leon unleashed a flurry of slashes. When his barrage slowed down, Lionel seized the chance for a perfect counter. A heavy attack that aimed to decapitate in one fell swoop whistled in the air, completely missing Leon's vitals. He surprisingly used his hand as a pivot point, blatantly copying Gray's winning move against him a few days ago. Instead of sticking with his rigid and predictable technique, Leon chose to evolve and incorporate more trick plays. Unfortunately, he can't fight like Lord Grey yet. He lacks the timing and confidence necessary to pull off something like this. Luenel managed to knock his head back, dampening the damage from the kick. He admitted that Leon is way stronger than he was in his first year, but it's about time to make Leon realize how big a difference one whole year in this academy could make. He picked up the pace. With a smile plastered on his face, Luenel rushed his junior, not allowing any room to breathe or regain solid footing. Eventually, Leon found himself on the ropes, stuck on the arena's edge. With nowhere else to run to, Luenel pounced like a vicious predator. His sword was caught by the protective magic before the sharp blade could slice Leon's neck like a hot knife through butter. As expected, the winner of the first match was the second-year top student, Luenel Hartman. Graceful in defeat, Leon thanked his senior for such an engaging match. Without wasting any more time, the referee announced the challenger matchup next. When Leon passed by his idol, he extended the sincerest good luck. Grey had already run his mouth. It would be embarrassing if he couldn't back it up on stage. He's fought against more vicious monsters than he can count before turning back time. Compared to the harrowing terror of the Liquidator and the Apocalypse, fighting an edgy teen feels completely winnable. On the other corner, Diebold dragged his blade along the ground as he whispered sweet nothings to the deceased Professor Varian Bradley. He is eager to send the madman's killer to hell for a bloody reunion. Without further ado, the selection match for the challengers is now underway. Grey's stance was solid and alert. Diebold, on the other hand, was as unorthodox as you can get. While they sized each other up, the Colosseum was so silent that you could hear a pin drop. As soon as the go signal was given, Grey swung his sword and forced the weirdo to the back foot. Much to his surprise, his attack bearing full force and weight seemed wholly ineffective. With a casual swing, Diebold drove him away. The casual swing was so heavy and forceful that it left his dominant arm shaking. Professor Ariel briefed him about Diebold's oddities before the fight. He's aware of the boosted reflexes, but it feels like Varian also buffed Immo's arm strength. With this much difference in raw power, petty tricks become entirely useless. Grey's mind immediately jumped to the most extreme step he could take. However, Professor Ariel already warned him not to use that power no matter what happens. The worst-case scenario is death. You can't come back from that. She emphasized that even though the tournament is important, it's simply not worth sacrificing his life over. Besides, the arena's defensive barrier won't hold against such sharpness. Using the technique might end up killing the opponent and some spectators along its path. To protect Ariel and the Divine Eye program, Grey would gladly take on some risks, but he can't possibly kill a fellow student in a school event no matter how shitty the student might be. Diebold turned the tide and took on the assailant role, forcing Grey to defend. Each swing packed a serious punch, but his movements were weirdly simple and robotic. With his physical stats and enhanced reflexes, Diebold should be able to dog-walk Grey without many problems. He's not lacking in technique either. The only explanation is that he's holding back. The weirdo is planning something. Look at those eyes. That's not the gaze of a sane person. For a brief moment, Grey felt a sinking morbid feeling in his gut. He stumbled backwards, barely dodging a clean vertical slash. Out of balance with both his feet in the air, Grey's eyes constricted as the metallic tip inches closer to his vitals. Knowing the limits of his speed, he dropped all hopes of dodging and focused on blocking. Much to his surprise, his half-assed attempt to prevent being stabbed in the face worked wonders. He definitely should have died that time, yet he survived somehow. Diebold likely weakened his attack at the last second purposefully. With the fight making her stress level skyrocket, Professor Ariel shot up to her feet. She activated her Divine Eye for a more detailed look at the arena, but found something disturbing instead. In place of Diebold's supposed heart was a material emanating malevolent ether. Her concentration was broken by Professor Budra's useless drivel demanding her attention. His buddies added that his second-year challenger was practically playing with his food. Even though he could end the duel anytime, he just keeps on dragging things out. Grey Lee has his hands full just trying to block haphazard attacks. This should be proof enough that Divine Eye geniuses are nothing but frauds. At this rate, the whole Divine Eye program would continue being humiliated. Budre and his bros were merrily laughing amongst themselves while barely paying attention to the fight. Ariel finally stepped forward and demanded that the fight be stopped right away. Budre took this outburst as yet another excuse to get out of having to prove competence. There is no need to worry about the well-being of participants. The magic department is supremely confident in their powerful protection spell. Any attack that would cause fatal injury will be automatically blocked. For years now, the Academy has been using this tech so students could fight seriously without fear. Ariel already knew all that, so she's being accused of trying to get out of a lost cause before it's too late. Just when she was screaming about the safety of her student, a burst of sinister intent burst inside the arena. Deeble finally stopped messing around and tapped into the malicious heart beating in his chest. Ariel is not a stranger to fearsome sights, but the unhinged look in that young man's face made her shiver to the core. Focusing the dark energy into his blade, Deeble unleashed a single slash that cut through everything in its path. The attack moved forward unobstructed. When the dust settled, the arena had been practically split in two. Even the protection magic that Boudra's department was so proud of turned into a thin curtain, easy to pierce, puncture, and slice. Seeing such a fearsome technique finally sobered up Boudre. No one expected the destruction of the barrier aside from Ariel. She summoned some corporeal ropes while cursing Varian for being a pain in her ass even after death. Ariel tried to fix the gaping hole in the formation, but the reflective property was too strong, rendering binding magic ineffectual. Thinking on her feet, she yelled at the magic department losers to disable the barrier immediately. The tournament is cancelled. This scene is not a showdown of swordsmanship anymore. Those who were supposed to man the barrier were shaken to the point of mortified silence. Since she can't rely on these stooges to do their jobs, Ariel yelled at Gray to just run for his life. Unbeknownst to her, running has been taken out of his options a while ago. If he ever turned his back on the monster in front of him, death would come instantly. The spectators were blinded by the bright lights and overwhelmed by the thick sense of power wafting in the air. Heathkit quietly estimated that Ariel's spell would likely take 30 seconds to reach the fighters. It's still early, but they have no choice. Heathkit gave Gray the subtle signal to go for the tech they'd been studying. The strict drill sergeant yelled at him to think of his body as the sword. Swinging a sword is for noobs. Moving body and weapon in unison is where it's at. No matter how simple the concept sounded, complete integration is easier said than done. But if Heathkit believes that he's ready, then he's probably somewhat ready. It's not like he has any other choice. Embodying the concept of a single blade, Gray fused his focus on the weapon in his hand. Diebold unleashed another unhinged attack that tore through the floor. The dark wind blade was made of pure, unadulterated chaos. The attack made contact with the protective barrier, causing a massive explosion that obscured vision. Gray was nowhere to be seen. He was completely unharmed by Diebold's offensive supremacy. Tapping into something slumbering deep inside, Gray disappeared and reappeared behind the opponent in the blink of an eye. For the first time since the fight started, Diebold felt truly threatened. Gray watched his edgy rival turn his head, and it felt like seeing a scene in slow motion. It's not that Diebold slowed down. Gray was the one who had gotten exponentially faster. Tapped into the mysterious power residing deep in his soul, Gray Lee pounced at the lunatic like a wild animal, his blade tearing the preset barrier to shreds. It happened quickly. Only those with good enough vision were able to see what was going on in the stage. He hit that boy with a finisher, sending Diebold flying out of bounds. The collision was so powerful that the barrier around the stage wasn't able to withstand the impact. The second year's psychotic representative involuntarily bore a hole through one of the Colosseum's walls. Everyone, including the laughable professors talking trash about Gray just a few seconds earlier, was floored in shock. Professor Heathkit watched the field carefully, focusing on his student's victim. The staff around the stage were in a panic. They were not prepared to deal with something like this in a supposed mock battle. The med team was contacted. While everyone was busy discussing the absurdity of what just happened, Diebold Radartel slowly emerged from the crumbling hole in the wall. Heathkit sensed the dark aura swirling around the young man and felt his blood run cold. Earlier, Diebold's battle stance was by the book standard. Right now, he looks ragged and wild with a sword in hand. The look in his eyes was completely devoid of life. He roared like a rabid animal. Most shockingly, he seemed completely unharmed. Professor Ariel yelled at Gray to stay sharp, for the fight is not over just yet. Instead of another sword-fighting bout, Gray was confronted by an array of sharp dark blades constructed through unnatural mana. The attacks kept coming, and they won't stop coming. Luckily, the lunatic has immense destructive power limited by dog-shit aim. Right now, the stage was basically being torn apart by forbidden techniques. Professor Boudreau went from sneering with arrogance to genuinely worrying about his own safety. Ariel implored the nerds manning the barrier to disengage the shield so the professors could intervene. The nerds were ass at their job, so they needed 10 more seconds. That means Gray must stay alive for a little bit longer. 10 seconds might seem short, but 10 seconds of constantly dodging lethal attacks doesn't sound ideal at all. While his body was constantly moving out of harm's way in autopilot, Gray locked in on the main threat. It's a good thing he did. After a few seconds of cover fire, Diebold broke his rhythm and closed the gap for a melee showdown. Gray raised his sword to defend at the nick of time. Feeling the backlash of that single attack, it's apparent that the lunatic's strength and speed had exceeded the human limit. Then again, Gray's not exactly a normal guy either. Once he grasped the perfect timing, he parried the first attack and repositioned himself farther. Even after going all out, Diebold remains unscathed. Something is seriously wrong with that boy. Like a persistent ghost, the lunatic followed Gray's brilliant repositioning and caught him moving a tad too slowly. As a result, he sustained a grave injury that purged copious amounts of blood from his body. Worried about the well-being of her favorite pupil, Professor Ariel just wanted to jump into the arena and take matters into her own hands. Gray snapped out of his agonizing stunned state and gritted his teeth. Intuitively, he knew that if he didn't fight back, he'd die right where he was standing. Desperate for more power in order to survive, the enigmatic force slumbering deep inside Gray lent him a lot more juice. For the first time ever, his extreme plea seemingly woke up something primal deep within. Fueled up by the mysterious force from the abyss, Gray could see a glimpse of the inevitable conclusion of this fight. He moved like lightning, chopping off both of Diebold's arms from the base, reducing that boy into a mannequin. The abrupt pain and immediate blood loss sent the lunatic into shock. Gray landed on the other side, stained by the spurting blood of the enemy who tried to get his ass first. Diebold was finally knocked unconscious, dropping to his knees like a little bitch. The professors, observers, and personnel were stunned by the silence. You could hear a pin drop in the ruined Colosseum with how silent it was. Finally, the nerds got their shit together and disabled the barrier. They were a few seconds too late. Thankfully, most of the professors knew how pressing their next response must be. Ariel was the first to dive down the stage, and her colleagues followed. Those who were well-versed in utility magic immediately restrained the armless body of the second-year representative who went rogue. As for Gray Lee, all of his strength had been sapped away from his body. Even breathing felt impossible. As soon as the mysterious power faded, he sensed the terrible drawback coming for his ass. Multiple large wounds opened all over his body at once. His frame could not possibly handle the inhuman power he just wielded. Professor Ariel ran towards her student's side and covered him with the light of healing magic. She can't possibly fix his bloody injuries by herself. Thankfully, the healing team had finally arrived to do their job. Gray lay on top of his pool of blood, taking in the restorative properties of the healing team's concentrated efforts. Slowly, his wounds closed up at a visible rate thanks to the adept level of recovery. When she saw the gnarly injuries close up, Ariel breathed a sigh of relief. Much to her surprise, the boy who looked like he had spilled every drop of blood in his body on the floor was already back on his feet. The healing team was flabbergasted. They've been doing this for a long time, and they have never met someone who recovers so quickly from such serious injuries. Just to be safe, Gray asked Professor Ariel to assess his health more thoroughly than any healer could. She lifted her monocle and took a glimpse at his soul. It was unbelievable. After drawing an ungodly amount of power from the mysterious source, Gray's soul remains intact. It doesn't have so much as a scratch. As for his physical health and body, the coordinated healing magic from the healers had already taken care of any problems. Professor Heathcote joined the conversation with pride. Just as he thought, his training method managed to lessen the backlash of using Gray's power. Ariel didn't appreciate this man's tone at all. Without healing magic, her best student could have died on this stage. She doesn't want to hear about reduced backlash or some bullshit. Heathcote poked the bear. Now he's lowering his head. In any case, he wants Gray to withstand the full recoil on his own someday. Still, that process will certainly take time. All in all, a lot of things went off script today. The source of all the chaos in this supposedly straightforward duel was that kid, Diebold Radardel. As the lunatic was being carted off the stage, Ariel shot the referee with a serious look and demanded the announcement of the result. Thankfully, the referee saw the instance when the second-year representative's protective barrier was activated and breached. Therefore, the winner of the selection match is the first-year representative, Gray Lee. Every student who came out to watch this annual tradition, regardless of year level, cheered like crazy. Details about the freshman from the Divine Eye Special class who beat a senior circulated among the crowd, making Gray a celebrity on campus. With this big dub, the Divine Eye student finally ended the storied 35-loss streak of freshmen over the decades. By the looks of it, the win-loss record might not even matter at all. After watching that fight and Gray's performance, no one can say that Ariel's judgment was wrong. Her Divine Eye remains infallible. With such an impressive showing and more than enough evidence of competence, the headmaster backed Ariel up. He'll make sure that no one supports the abolishment of the Divine Eye Special class. If anything, the faculty should be ashamed of even considering doing such a stupid thing. They almost expelled a student with such an immaculate talent. Ariel was completely aware and grateful that Gray saved her spot. In all her years in this institute, no student had ever done so much for her and her mission. Now that the faculty is leaning in the opposite direction, some suggested holding those who pushed for the abolishment of the program accountable. In just a single incident, everyone turned on that pig, Professor Boudre, and his stupid-ass cronies. Feeling the scrutinizing and disgusted glares of his peers, the pig froze. Before he could get dogpiled even harder, Boudre excused himself and clumsily skedaddled out of the stage with his buddies. The rest of the faculty just laughed at the new joke in their office. Those who have been with the academy for a long time could still recall the old saying to never pick a fight with the Divine Eye. The saying holds up, but compared to the old days, the Divine Eye holder had mellowed out a lot. Times have changed compared to back then. Professor Ariel had become a different person. Hearing the conversation of the old heads, Gray wondered about Ariel's past. Now that all the distractions are gone, World Union Academy's headmaster, Orodram Alexandro, approached Gray to discuss a few things of grave concern to the institute. Gray tensed up as soon as the headmaster got in his face. Alexandro noted that in that match just now, Diebold Radartel clearly showed some unnatural power forced into his body for the sake of augmentation. The Academy will be investigating that matter further in the coming days, but the fact is that a mock battle that should have been completely safe ended up putting a promising student's life at risk. Headmaster Alexandra lowered his head and apologized. The Academy will accept full responsibility for the oversight of not detecting the anomaly beforehand. Gray relaxed and politely accepted the apology. Since nothing untoward ended up happening to him in the end, he's willing to just let the matter go. With that out of the way, the headmaster wanted to discuss one more thing. After Diebold went berserk and fought above the level theoretically possible, Gray also unleashed something of equal or higher intensity. The headmaster ascertained that whatever Gray used wasn't tethered to magic. It was something far stranger, a type of power that modern magic theory can't even begin to analyze. Alexandra wanted to know more about the ace up in Gray's sleeves. If there's someone he can't share the truth with, it would be this guy. Gray can't bring up any info that would give away anything from before his regression, not when he doesn't know where the liquidator's mastermind is hiding. So he chose to feign ignorance. The headmaster pushed him to give a little more info. It's hard to believe that he's ignorant of the power given, how expertly he utilized it earlier. Gray explained that he was completely unaware of anything like it slumbering inside him. He attributed the power's discovery and honing to Professor Ariel. Ariel heard the kid's lies. By the time he took down the ogre general, Gray was already using that power freely. She reckoned that he must be running a play. He turned to his professor with an expectant glance. Ariel needs to go along with his play. To stop the liquidator, it would be best to keep painting the professor as the one holding the power. Thankfully, Ariel swiftly picked up what he was putting down without a single word uttered. She saw Gray's angle and found it brilliant. Honestly, the kid doesn't act like someone living life for the first time. If Gray trusts her to come through, she will, without a doubt, step up to take the spotlight. Ariel joined the conversation and eloquently explained to the headmaster that Gray's power is indeed untouchable by magic theory. However, her divine eyes could see it clearly. After observing the mysterious power, she assigned Professor Heathcote to help Gray out with training. With Heathcote's affinity for physical training, today's level of control became possible. In addition, she's still researching how to draw Gray's power out more effectively. For that reason, she demanded complete authority over Gray's supervision solely for her. They can't have the headmaster poking around even more. Thankfully, Alexandro didn't fight her for this request and granted her complete authority over Gray and his mysterious power. Not only Gray Lee, but the entire Divine Eye Special Group's handling will also remain in Ariel's hand to command. If they ever need any assistance, the headmaster and the academy would gladly help. Ariel wasn't expecting such a positive response. She thought they would have to fight Alexandro's overreach, but they got what they wanted, freedom. For that, both the professor and student were extremely grateful. With Gray's questioning out of the way, the headmaster headed for the special underground medical ward to examine Diebold Redartle's condition. He asked Ariel to tag along. They're going to need her specialized down there. Ariel followed suit. Before the end of the day and after wrapping up the Diebold investigation, Ariel called Gray into her office to talk. She sipped on her tea and gave her student the rundown of her findings. As per the results of the initial analysis, the power the kid used was nearly identical to the liquidators. There's no doubt that he was augmented by the same crystals from that vicious research facility. Gray wanted to know what happened to his enemy, and Ariel paused for a bit. Without mincing her words, she answered that the kid had died. Even though he's prepared for such a result, Gray was still shaken. He wanted to ask if he was at fault, but Ariel assured him that this was an inevitable result. The moment that diabolical power activated, Diebold Redartle stopped being himself completely. He may have already been gone as far back as when the power was implanted into him by God knows who. It's clear that Diebold was a weapon specifically aimed at Gray. The kid was just the bullet of retaliation for the killing of Varian Bradley. If Diebold was tampered with after Varian's death, that can only mean that someone is continuing his evil work out there. This was the doing of a third party. Professor Ariel is almost certain that a bigger fish hiding behind all this is in play. She'll keep digging into every little connection, but it's going to take time. Her intuition keeps telling her that the deeper and higher parts of the academy are somehow involved in this mess. They can't trust anyone. Gray was of the same opinion. He offered his assistance if there's anything Ariel needs to be done. For now, she just wanted to properly thank him for all that he's already done. As for that mysterious power, finding out that tapping into it no longer wounds his soul is massive. Still, the recoil on his physical body was worse than ever before. Those wounds could have easily killed him if the healers were late. With that in mind, Ariel and Heathkit agreed that Gray is now ready for the next stage of his special training. In the next phase, he'll learn how to control that power way better than he can right now. A few days later, preparations for Gray's training are now in place. Standing in the middle of the training ground with a sword in hand, he was surrounded by nearly 100 target dummies. Needless to say, this training method is going to be dangerous and painful. For one last time, Heathkit asked Gray if he was willing to consider a safer option at the cost of a little more time. Gray won't be backing out. He's already made his peace, and he's ready for the pain. Since the kid had shown his resolve, Heathkit stopped his meddling and gave him the green light to get started. Gray closed his eyes and tried to recall how his fight against Diebold felt. He became one with his blade, a sensation that embodies sharpness and danger. As soon as he got in touch with the increasingly familiar feeling, the mysterious power coming from within manifested outwardly, coating his blade. The enigmatic power connected his physical state with the weapon itself, literally and metaphorically making his mantra real. Now that he's back in his berserk state, Gray opened his eyes and burst into motion. The armored dummies in his immediate vicinity were absolutely ruined, shredded into 100 little pieces. Every slash was invisible to the untrained eye. A single second felt like forever. His speed was unparalleled. Everywhere Gray passed, brutal destruction followed. The team of healers contracted to work alongside Gray was shocked to see how incredibly fast the kid could move. Heathkit reserved judgments for the end of the session. He kept focused on his student. Gray was moving like the wind. His blade was utterly unstoppable by the thick armor of the dummies. When he finally reached his absolute limit, the backlash forcefully stopped him in his tracks. Multiple wounds opened his flesh and spilled his blood. Even when under the agonizing effects of the drawback pushing him down, Gray pushed to failure and beheaded one more dummy. Afterwards, he tried to stand on his feet but fell when every ounce of power left his body at once. Face planting into the training ground floor was the healer team's cue to jump in and do their thing. Since these healers for hire were ready to spring into action, sending the combined healing light of recovery magic went without a hitch. Their restorative mana caressed Gray's unconscious body with care. A few seconds later, his freshly opened wounds started closing on their own. Gray regained consciousness and sat up to thank the healers for bringing him back to the world of the living. Heathkit happily informed Gray that he held on to the berserk form a bit longer than the last time. With more repetitions, his body should gradually grow resilient and learn how to endure the backlash. Gray didn't notice it back then because he was laser-focused on staying alive on the stage, but using this power actually hurts like hell. Heathkit attributed that excruciating pain and suffering to the natural reaction of the body when pushing past one's limits. As a seasoned instructor, he understands that this intense training method can be excessive. Whether they continue down this road is entirely up to Gray. Not everyone can endure voluntary torture day after day. Our boy is built different though. For the sake of getting stronger, he'd destroy his body and build it back up however many times necessary. He asked for another batch of armored dummies. He wants to go again right away. But before he could show how mentally resilient he was, Professor Ariel walked in and pressed pause on the session. Looking at her face, she doesn't look too pleased at all. Ariel put her foot down and gave Gray a hard limit on training his berserk state to once a day. Gray tried to argue, citing that his body's already healed, so there's no harm in going again. With this method, and with healers ready to bail him out, his soul shouldn't be in any danger. Ariel insisted on the hard limit. Physical injuries can be easily healed with recovery magic, but Gray must avoid amassing minuscule damage to his nerves, damage that could accumulate before he can stabilize. At the very least, it could throw off his sense when swinging a sword. At worst, it could result in losing his ability to wield a weapon altogether. Gray understands that risk better than anyone. He's been there before. Heathkit found Ariel's intervention a source of relief. Even he would hesitate to subject a student to repeat this kind of masochistic training multiple times a day. One of the healers could hold himself back and ask Gray why he's in such a hurry to get stronger when he's already considered the strongest freshman as he is. Ariel blames herself for Gray's stubbornness. She dragged that boy into a fight with a villain like Bradley. Because of that, the people working in the shadows have marked him as an enemy. The Deebles incident was just beginning. There are powerful people hiding in the Academy's darkest corners. There's also a possibility that the criminal group, Blooddrinker, which stole the magic catalyst for Bradley, might get involved down the line. Isolating Gray somewhere heavily guarded won't even solve the problem. They have no idea how far and wide the enemy's reach can be. Training the kid to become stronger is the only viable way to survive. Gray assured Professor Ariel that he's 100% committed to the cause. Stopping the liquidator experiment was a choice he made independently. Still, Ariel knows a gem when she sees one. Gray is definitely a cut above the best of the best. All she can really do is help him make the most of that latent power. Knowing this woman, Heathkit asked her to just spill what she's got in mind. She proposed giving Gray a shortcut to the quickest and safest way for a swordsman to get stronger. That's right. It's time to give the kid a new sword for the fastest material improvement in his combat power. Gray thought that the Academy-issued sword was supposed to be a top-tier custom weapon. He wasn't wrong. Normally, the starter sword is more than good enough for a first-year student. Unfortunately, the designers didn't account for an anomaly in the form of Gray Lee. It simply can't withstand his power. Evidence of that had already started showing on the blade. It has been chipped in multiple places, decreasing its sharpness. No ordinary weapon could handle the unknown force. Thankfully, Professor Ariel's vault contains everything beyond the realm of ordinary. Heathkit was shocked. He couldn't believe that this woman was seriously willing to part with one of her precious treasures for a student. Ariel used her personal key and inserted it into an invisible keyhole. Upon turning the lock, her hidden vault manifested out of thin air. Ariel believes that Gray has earned the right to get a glimpse of her hidden gate. On the other side of this otherworldly hole in the fabric of reality, untold treasures await. All Gray has to do is come in. Gray followed Ariel into her personal dimension, calmly stepping into the light. When the door closed behind him, Gray witnessed something that he could never have dreamed of. Strewn around the ground were countless riches, gold coins that lit up the place in an alluring light. There were precious elixirs, maps, and scrolls chaotically sitting around. The treasure halls extended as far as the eye could see. Ariel must be richer than a freaking gold-hoarding dragon. She hadn't visited her vault in a while, so she had already forgotten where the sword section was. While they look for a whole-ass room dedicated to precious swords, Gray could close his slack-jawed mouth. A few minutes later, they finally entered the sword room. The idea is to find a sword that would suit Gray's style. Thankfully, they have a nearly endless number of choices available. There were so many dangerous weapons on every side. The place was full of precious blades in every direction. Heathkit casually claimed that there is no other collection as extensive as this one anywhere in the world. With nearly infinite options to choose from, it's easy to get decision paralysis. Ideally, Ariel would like to test each one of the blades with Gray's full strength. But due to the self-destructive nature of that power, they would only be able to do that with one sword per day at the maximum. They might as well cut that process and pick a few to try out one by one. To start, she suggested beginning with the sharpest sword in her collection. She led Gray to its rack and the kid picked it up. His first impression was the sword's weighty heft. Ariel admitted that the blade might be on the heavier side of the spectrum, but it certainly cuts like a dream. She magically spawned a target dummy and asked her student to try it out for himself. Gray didn't see the harm in trying it out, so he dropped down to his fighting stance. He stepped forward and swung the giant blade with all his might. Without the enhancements of his berserk state, his attack reached the level of destructiveness that would make an average freshman piss their pants. The dummy was completely sliced in half, and the blade continued in its trajectory, ruining the vault's floors. Gray just experienced how amazing the sharpest sword in the collection was. Ariel was quite impressed by the power Gray was able to bring out, but also noted that it's still a little too heavy for practical combat for now. Heathkit concurred. No matter how sharp a blade is, it's useless if the user can't hit anything. Still, there's no harm in Gray having an excellent weapon in his back pocket. Who knows? Maybe he'll encounter a sturdy, large, and lumbering opponent like a divine beast or structure. A heavy sword would do nicely. Ariel will also give Gray a magic storage pouch so he wouldn't have to carry his shit around like a normie. While Gray felt excited at the prospect of wielding such a great weapon, he couldn't help but feel like he was not worthy of borrowing something this precious. Ariel insisted that letting Gray use the weapon is better than letting it collect dust in her vault. It is better for it to be in the hands of someone who can use it properly. Besides, facing the foes behind Varian, who's trying to summon the Liquidator, will be a grueling task. It's best to gear up with as much firepower as possible. Recalling how he felt after getting one-shot by the Liquidator in his past life, the despair it brought to him and his comrades, Gray gratefully accepted his professor's insistence. Heathkit also gave Gray some necessary advice to avoid showing the sword to other people unless he intends to use it. If he ever puts this weapon on the market, it would be worth at least 10 billion, equivalent to no less than 10,000 gold coins. Gray already felt reluctant to accept such a precious rental, but knowing the exact figure blew his mind even further. He panicked and tried to return the blade to Ariel. He would never feel comfortable swinging a 10 billion credit weapon around, but Professor Ariel won't accept returns. Besides, she's not lending Gray the sword. She's giving it for free. She knows that the kid would just hold back from using the sword if he were to just borrow the thing. Gray uncomfortably lowered the blade and refused to believe the words coming out of his professor's mouth. Ariel asserted that if she could protect the Divine Eye's admission with just a measly 10 billion, she would gladly pay up. Gray should just consider the sword a late reward for everything he's done for Ariel and the program recently. When he tried to refuse the professor's generosity again, Ariel finally took offense. She didn't like that the boy viewed the Divine Eye's admission as lower than a mere 10 billion, a drop in the bucket of her wealth. For the second time, Gray accepted the blade and swore to take good care of the weapon. Ariel also calmed down, pleased to reward her favorite pupil. Other than the sharpest sword in the collection, she wanted to give Gray something ordinary too, something that could be used in a regular battle without attracting unnecessary attention. While Ariel browsed her collection, Gray stood with Heathkit to praise the professor's imposing treasury. As far as Heathkit knows, no one in the world possesses a keen vision on par with Ariel's Divine Eye. With her special ability, she can practically make as much money as she wants. She's equipped with a literal infinite money glitch. Torn between the endless choices, Ariel asked Heathkit's advice as an instructor regarding what to give Gray. Going by instinct, he randomly picked one of the inconspicuous blades nearby. Gray grabbed onto its golden hilt and asked for permission to test out the unremarkable sword. When given the go signal, he burst into a flurry of motion, executing a whole series of relentless attacks. Unlike his first reward, the lightness of the sword made it possible to execute his usual combos. By the time he was done with his connecting chain attacks, he had a firm grasp on the sword's pros and cons. It's certainly a well-made sword, but he couldn't help but feel like something was off about it. Maybe it's just unfamiliarity. Maybe it's something else. Heathkit also sees the tinge of discomfort in Gray's movements. It's simply not a great fit. Since they're already in the process of experimentation, they might as well go crazy with it and give Gray an experimental weapon. Heathkit approached one of the swords displayed on the wall, highlighting its bizarrely bright appearance. The sword was far from traditional. Hell, it even looked mechanical. Gray curiously asked what the deal was with this sword. What makes it so special? Instead of giving him some long-winded answer, Heathkit suggested that he try holding on to it. As soon as Gray lifted the sword out of the wall, he was surprised by how light it felt. Furthermore, the blade itself had no edges. Running his fingers through the sides didn't cut him. It was an experimental weapon for a reason. Heathkit explained that the sword was designed with new technology. It wasn't meant for real-time combat. It may be an unsharpened slab of steel, but nothing can beat it when it comes to durability. Given Gray's ability, it might be a great match. Basically, he doesn't need a sword with a sharp edge with the power he gains from tapping into that mysterious force. Heathkit doubts that any sword, no matter how powerful, could withstand the full release of Gray's power. The young man will keep growing stronger and stronger in the future. Eventually, even the swords in this vault might do nothing but slow him down. If that's the case, looking into a future where he no longer relies on the edge of the weapon to fight might be a viable strategy. A sword like this experimental weapon might be a perfect future-proofing tool. To demonstrate its capabilities, Heathkit wielded the blade and showed his own prowess by attacking another dummy. He left quite some substantial marks on the surface. Nothing too impressive. But in the next second, the metal dummy crumpled from the inside. He was skillful enough to cause internal damage with a simple swing. Naturally, Gray was easily astonished by the awesome show of technique. Professor Ariel, on the other hand, looked annoyed. She could tell Heathkit was just trying to show off. Personally, Ariel thinks Gray is better off continuing to wield a traditional blade, but there's no harm in letting him try out some experimental weapons. Ariel was also open to the possibility of letting Gray peruse the other sections of her vault. There are plenty of other armaments aside from swords in this massive treasury. Even though the invitation was tempting, Gray was simply committed to the way of the sword. He just wanted to check out every blade displayed in this giant room. He looked to the side and saw a sword made with a mesmerizing blood red ore. It looked much lighter and stronger than the first light sword he tested. Gray was like a kid in a candy store if the candies were tools for killing. While he was running around and looking for anything that would catch his attention, he came across a particular sword with a thin blade, an inconspicuous type by all accounts. He was struck with the feeling of intense familiarity, like he had seen this sword before. He asked Professor Ariel about details pertaining to the weapon. She asserted that an old student of hers left it behind after graduating. It's not exactly a famous or flashy sword, but it's very well made. Gray felt compelled to give this slender blade a try. As soon as his hand touched the grip, he felt comfortable. It was easy to hold and move around with, as if it fit in his hand like a perfectly tailored glove. Another dummy was spawned in so he could test the effectiveness of the weapon. This time, he didn't feel the need to do any fancy footwork or to inject as much strength into a single booming strike. He simply beheaded the dummy in one fell swoop. Even the professors were a little astounded by the beauty of such simple movement. Gray was all smiles. He had never held a weapon that fit so nicely. It was as if he had been practicing with this exact sword since he was born. Ariel asked if he had found his match, and he really might have. If you find a blade this comfortable to wield, you hold on to it for the rest of your life. In that case, Ariel signed off on taking out the vault as well. They'll have to conduct a more thorough assessment to test if it's compatible with Gray's power or not. Again, Gray felt a little uncomfortable just claiming another precious weapon, especially after finding out that it was made by a fellow student of the Divine Eye program. Ariel assured him that the sword would be happier if it were used instead of just sitting idly stored in a wall. Speaking of fellow students, Gray asked what the name of the alumnus was who forged the sword. Ariel casually dropped the name Metal Lum Norum. Gray was shaken. He had heard of that name before. In fact, most soldiers in his past life have. Metal Lum Norum was hailed as the world's greatest magic swordsmith, a man who dedicated his life to forging weapons of legend. Stumbling into a Metal Lum sword was definitely a big score. The day after the trip to the vault, the sword test was conducted on the training ground. To test both strength and durability, Gray was advised to take the weapon they are assessing to its absolute limits. Starting off hot, Professor Ariel assigned him the edgeless experimental sword. Beginning with the most unusual sword to see how Gray's power would interact with its unique properties sounds like an interesting trial. After gratefully accepting the weapon, Gray positioned himself in the middle of the armored dummy sea. He closed his eyes and started reaching down to his soul, slowly activating the latent power slumbering inside him. Halfway through the process of entering the enhanced state, something went awry, and his activation was cut off for some unknown reason. Gray was confused and surprised. He's never had a problem setting up since the mock battle. Thinking that it was just some minor hiccup, he chose to reset and try it again. This time, he put a lot more emphasis on becoming one with the sword. He steadily poured in the power, enhancing the experimental blade's destructive properties. A few seconds later, the same thing happened, and his enhancement scattered away. His power simply wasn't working on the sword. It was a bizarre interaction. Worried, Professor Ariel asked if he felt any difference in his usual physical condition. As far as he could tell, everything was totally normal. If that's the case, the problem might be caused by the sword. They'd have to put the edgeless blade aside for now and try a different one to troubleshoot the issue. For now, the hypothesis is incompatibility. Maybe the latent power doesn't jive well with the experimental sword. If that's the case, Ariel pulled out the magic storage pouch and mentally pulled out the most ordinary sword of the bunch. Of course, she had to aura farm a little while pulling out the metallic blade. Gray received the sword and aura farmed himself. The student learned well from the professor. Once more, he recited his one with the sword mantra in his head. Slowly and steadily, the power manifested into the material world, engulfing the metallic blade. Before long, his entire body was engulfed in the monstrous enhancement. Thankfully, the mysterious force worked this time. The previous failed test with the edgeless blade had him on edge a little. Just when Gray was about to proceed with the trial, he heard a voice faintly whispering directly into his ear. He looked around, trying to find the source, but not a single person was in his audible vicinity. Once more, he heard the whispers. This time, it was a little clearer. The voice was telling him about the time that would inevitably come. It was ominous and puzzling. Unaware of the unnerving development, the professors were just glad to see that triggering the power wasn't the problem. Choosing to ignore the eerie whispers, Gray focused on the task at hand. He leaped forward. His speed was augmented to the point of flickering out of view. From the very first attack, his decapitating slash was evidently sharper and cleaner than ever before. The output and the strength of his cuts were the same as before, but there was a stark difference in the smoothness of each swing. Trying to hold on to that sensation, Gray continued dicing up multiple armored dummies at once. His attacks felt light, but his body feels even lighter. Quicker on his feet, shredding metal with the light blade became an even more efficient process. Halfway through his testing, Gray was able to sneak in some fancy movement techniques that followed some crazy routes. The same healers who were there to heal his injuries yesterday could see the vast improvement in his already monstrous speed. If you zoom out from above, the training ground would look like a light show of killing and annihilation. Gray was completely lost in the sauce. It felt as though he had gained wings and learned how to fly. When the final scrap hit the floor with a clang, Gray attentively turned his head back to where he had entered at the start. Much to his surprise, every single dummy in his path had already been sliced and diced, their pieces pulverized and broken. He couldn't believe it. There were no more targets, no more dummies to helplessly dominate. As far as he knows, the number of targets set for today was the same number as before. Even after pushing past his limits, he could only cut about half of them back then. Yet, in such a short amount of time, he improved his stamina enough to wipe out the entire board in one go. Professor Ariel, Heathkit, and the healing team ran to his side, worried that he might suffer from intense backlash again. They were all taken aback by the fact that the young man was still standing. Gray was so caught up in the shock of his improvement and the sensation of being in the zone that he failed to notice the elephant in the room. There was a massive wound stretching from his chest down to his stomach. Instead of small cuts, the drawback this time around was consolidated into one fatal injury. If you look into the gaping deep wound, you will see Gray's internal organs in full HD. Seeing such a gnarly injury, Ariel implored her student to drop the sword at once. Gray followed Ariel's stern advice and let go of the grip, letting the metal lum sword hit the ground. When the feeling of being sliced open finally caught up to his pain receptors, he was struck with agony worse than everything he had experienced before. The healing team immediately sprang into action, and the professors ran towards the side of their precious student. Much to everyone's surprise, Gray was able to stay awake and get up after just a few seconds of taking in the combined healing light. He wanted to get back on his feet as soon as possible, but was quickly humbled by the toll of doing what he did earlier. His strength had been sapped out of his body, making him shiver and tremble in complete exhaustion. Heathkit lent him a shoulder to lean on and some valuable advice to stop pushing too hard for no reason. Losing the amount of blood that he lost would undoubtedly have some severe consequences on his stamina even with healing magic. Ariel required him to rest for a while. Nevertheless, breaking past another limit and blowing the expectations out of the water is definitely a good sign of good things to come. Insistent on being the voice of caution, Ariel could recognize that the kid is prone to moving without realizing his own condition, an extremely dangerous trait. In actual combat, where dedicated healers are not a thing, negligence could kill. Aside from Gray's overzealous positive results, the metal lum sword also surpassed expectations. The allegedly ordinary weapon remained pristine after that showing. There was not a single scratch to be seen on the blade. It's truly a remarkable sword. For a split second, Ariel's divine eye caught a hint of something bizarre. The sword's glow just got a little stronger. It was an infinitesimally small change, so she just attributed the glow to her mind playing tricks on her for now. While they were wrapping up today's session, Professor Ariel sensed something alarming in the distance that made her turn around with a grim expression. The academy building right next to the training grounds just blew up. A massive explosion just blasted that structure wide open. This was an unexpected turn of events. Who the hell would dare attack the academy? The debris from the explosion started raining down on the nearby area, filling the training ground with loose rocks. This was an unprecedented attack on the World Union Academy's main annex, an act of terrorism so brazen that only a lunatic would attempt to even do it. Students came running out of the blasted building, desperate to save themselves from the disruptive explosion. With the debris raining down on the perimeter, all instructors worked together to deploy the academy barrier. They had their priorities straight: to protect the lives of the young ones first. Gray watched in confusion and turmoil as the explosion spread and the smoke blotted out the sun. Heathkit noted that the origin of the blast was consistent with the area that houses the hazardous materials vault, and the tool of attack was clearly man-made. Right after the blast, he sensed something akin to teleportation magic for a split second. By the looks of it, someone just openly robbed the academy in broad daylight. This type of thing was supposed to be impossible. The vault walls are notoriously impregnable. They were built to withstand most explosive spells, and they are protected by powerful anti-teleportation magic in case something did go through. Ariel could feel traces of liquidator energy mixed into the billowing smoke. Whoever was behind this attack and thievery must have used crystals made in that bizarre underground lab. It was a methodical destruction of the outer wall and anti-teleportation field. The ones behind this incident were undoubtedly linked to that piece of shit, Varian Bradley. The timeline might have just accelerated. They actually made such a bold move against the Academy HQ.